Ladies and Gentlemen, dear colleagues, meine Damen und Herren, ich wünsche Ihnen allen einen guten Morgen.
Good morning, colleagues. I'd like to wish you all a very good morning. The session is resumed. I have two communications at the beginning of this morning's proceedings. First of all, Nicholas Bay from the 7th of February 2024 has become a member of the ECR group. And the second communication I have for you is on decisions taken by several committees to enter into interinstitutional negotiations pursuant to Rule 71, paragraph 1, announced at the opening of the session on Monday, the 5th of February. The President has, in the interim, received a request for a vote in Parliament by the Greens EFA group, reaching at least the medium threshold on the decision of the Libe Committee to enter into negotiations on the following file. A temporary derogation combating online child sexual abuse. I therefore announce that the vote on this will be held today. In respect of other decisions to enter into negotiations, the President has received no request for a vote in Parliament by members, nor a political group, nor groups reaching at least the medium threshold. The committees may therefore begin negotiations on the basis of the reports. And I would like to extend my best wishes to all involved in the negotiations for a successful outcome and for a successful assertion of the positions of the European Parliament. We now move on to the first item for this morning's debate, submitted by the Commission and by the Council on empowerment of farmers and fairly rewarded agriculture and a dialogue on sustainable agriculture. I would like first to give the floor to Minister Labib on behalf of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. President, honourable members of the Parliament, dear Commissioner. The Belgian presidency of the Council of the EU has taken note of the measures announced by the Commission to respond to the demands of our farmers. We have put the item on the agenda of the next meeting of the Agri-Fisheries Council, which will take place on February 26, to allow the Minister of Agriculture to express their views on the measures proposed by the Commission, as well as on the possible need for further measures. As the European Council pointed out, on February the 1st, the European Common Agriculture Policy has an essential role to play. However, the rules adopted in 2021 to reform the CAP need to be reassessed in the light of current realities. Ces règles ont été présentées avant le Covid.
The proposals were initially presented before COVID and before the onset of the war in Ukraine. They therefore require to be updated so that we can strike an appropriate equilibrium in our agricultural policy. That is to say, we need to guarantee food security and equally fair remuneration for farmers. We will need to take, of course, a short-term approach, but equally a medium-term and strategic vision in order to ensure that we have sustainable agriculture in the European Union in every sense of the term. That is to say, for the planet, but also for those who are involved in the sector. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much indeed, Minister. I now give the floor to Maroš Šefčovič on behalf of the Commission. Vice President, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Madam Minister, honourable members, good morning to you all. We can be rightly proud of the crucial role played by Europe's agri-food sector, guaranteeing food security, safety and quality not only for 450 million Europeans, but for many others around the world. Quite literally putting safe, high-quality food on our tables. while at the same time making a massive contribution to the European and global economy, and striving to contribute to the twin green and digital transitions. But while the sector has shown remarkable resilience in the face of challenges such as pandemic and Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, we must ensure that our food system is also fit for the future. With the Green Deal, we have already put in place an ambitious roadmap to lead us to that future. And yet the reality of climate change, biodiversity loss, growing resource scarcity, price shocks, and an increasingly competitive global market is having a huge impact on the farming sector and rural communities. We have seen from the farmers protesting on the streets of Europe that many of them feel trapped, that their needs are not being met. So we must act to secure the future of the sector and those who work within it and those who benefit from it, namely all of us. We have to ensure that the agri-food sector remains competitive, but with decent incomes for all farmers and SMEs along the entire chain, not least to attract the next generation of young farmers. All whilst bringing the sector within the planetary boundaries. And this means a future where farming and nature go hand in hand in balance. Views on how to move forward are understandably varied, and we have seen increasing polarizations on the number of topics. It is therefore imperative that we will bring all the stakeholders together to see how we can look for joint solutions and define common vision and reach a new consensus. That is why we launched the strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture in the European Union. And I had the pleasure to discuss the dialogue with the Committee of Agriculture and Rural Development of this House, as well as with the ministers in the Agriculture and Fisheries Council ahead of its launch on 25th of January. The dialogue involves participants from EU level, associations and organizations, including umbrella organizations representing a number of European groups. There are many reasons which have driven farmers onto the streets in the past weeks, and it's important not to oversimplify the situation, because the problems of agri-food sectors are complex. There are those whom the system serves well, and there are those who are being left behind. There are environmental champions, and there are those who need our help to become more sustainable. There are those who benefit from open trade, and there are those who are being squeezed by it. So that is why the strategic dialogue must cover all the core questions and involve all stakeholders, and I believe that we should focus on ensuring a fair standard of living for farmers and rural communities, supporting agriculture within the boundaries of our planet and its ecosystem. We should discuss how to exploit the huge opportunities offered by knowledge and technological innovation, and how to promote a thriving future for the EU's food system in the competitive world. Let me also highlight that our farmers continue being supported by EU budget through the Common Agriculture Policy. But we know that this money alone is not enough to address the challenges we are discussing today, nor to deal with the climate change. Let's look at the devastating droughts in Spain, the apocalyptic floods in Greece, Slovenia, Italy and elsewhere, the forest fires raging out of control. So inaction would merely lead to even greater costs in the coming decades. Such a disasters can only be prevented if we have healthy natural resources, and only healthy soils, clean water and abundant pollinators can protect high yields and farmers' incomes in the face of climate and biodiversity crises. Farmers know what they are doing, and I have seen this for myself firsthand. So our job now is to support farmers in the transition, helping them de-risk this necessary transformation and scaling up all the good practices in agriculture. It is crucial to work with the entire food chain so that consumers can better appreciate the value of sustainability. Our farmers deserve to make a decent living. And that will only happen if we work together to achieve our climate and biodiversity goals. I know that the future of agriculture is a complex topic for conversation. But I firmly believe that this strategic dialogue will ultimately help us speak with one voice of the common future we will pursue for farmers, the environment and our union as a whole. So let's work together. Let's discuss it thoroughly also this morning. I will stop here and, Mr. President, I very much look forward to our debate. Thank you.
Herzlichen Dank. Wir kommen
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner. We now move on to the speakers on behalf of the political groups. May I call Manfred Weber.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, Herr Vizepräsident, President, Vice President Šefčovič, Minister. Agricultural policy is at the centre of the debate today, and that is good, because agricultural policy is not subordinate to environmental policy. It is a policy area of its own. We're talking about the production of wholesome food, which is perhaps something we take for granted, but we think it's extremely important, and we thank farmers for what they do. Agricultural policy is also about the future of rural areas, which is key to the future of Europe. We have major challenges in front of us. We as the EPP are in favour of biodiversity, water protection, animal welfare protection. We must tackle the challenges of our time head-on, but we cannot pursue ideological policies. We have to base our policies on arguments and expertise. In the Envy Committee here, they wanted to label wood as a non-renewable material. That shows the clear ideology of policy, and anyone who manages a forest would have been shaking their head when they heard that. Now, of course, strategic dialogue is paramount, and we're also carrying out dialogue outside. Now, many say they want to listen to farmers. Well, 12 months ago, we as the EPP asked for a sensible debate on the CAP, and we wanted a debate on the nature restoration law. And the temperature, the mood back then was quite different. We said that the SURE initiative, the Sustainable Use Regulation, and the Nature Restoration Law, we said they were bad laws back then. Now, it would be wrong also to impose the mandatory use of less pesticides. So that's why we said that those legislative proposals went in the wrong direction. We have been criticised, pilloried. Peter Liese was criticised very heavily by the head of the Envy Committee for our policies. And now, however, others criticising Brussels for producing too much bureaucracy. That's what the French president is saying. But that's what we said a year ago. Now, farmers know that they can depend on us. We will be their advocate. We have fought hard. Yes, we're in favour of biodiversity protection. Yes, we're in favour of protecting the environment, but together with farmers, not against them.
Garcia Perez.
The next speaker is Ms. Garcia Perez.
Gracias, presidente. Gracias.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Vice President Šefčovič. Now, I'm quite surprised, given that the agricultural sector is up in arms right across Europe and we're having an important debate on it, and we don't have the Commissioner for Agriculture here. It's not that he's not here. He doesn't seem to be anywhere at all. He's completely disappeared. But anyway, let's talk about what he's supposed to be responsible for. Farmers' protests in the European Union have shown us that the farming sector needs the European Union, just as the European Union needs sustainable agriculture, because thanks to farmers, we have high-quality food. And it's thanks to the European Union that farmers have more protection vis-à-vis the massive challenges that they face, such as the increase in production costs and the dramatic consequences of climate change. Getting over the farming crisis needs to be done with the assistance of the European and not via indiscriminate attacks on the CAP, as have been made by some European governments, Hungary and France, for example. Let's not forget that the latest reform of the CAP was adopted by all national governments from all political parties, including Mr. Orban's government, the same man who is now standing on tractors and regaling everyone with populist rhetoric. The damage caused by Italian and Spanish truck drivers in France are intolerable. The apology from the French government is a positive gesture, but it's insufficient. The Commission needs to adopt the necessary measures to mitigate the costs that hauliers are facing and to guarantee the free circulation of goods. Ladies and gentlemen, we need more dialogue and less polarisation. Farmers need to be aware that the dispute between the right and the far right is damaging to their interests, because the far right are not looking to increase farming subsidies. What they're looking to do is renationalise agriculture, which would be devastating for European farms. We need to talk to and listen to farmers. The protests deserve a clear response from the Commission and Member States. Support to the agricultural sector needs to maintain the extraordinary direct assistance, particularly for those farmers who are the most vulnerable to price increases and the consequences of floods and droughts. It's also crucial to ensure that the directive against unfair commercial practices is implemented in all member states, because that would help to improve the position of farmers in the supply chain. Fair prices. Simplifying bureaucracy is another measure that's necessary in a context of increased regulations. The first thing to do is to identify which administrative burden could be reduced, because simplifying doesn't mean no longer complying, it means complying in a simpler manner. And if we want to ensure that we have a new generation of farmers, it's necessary for all member states to apply 3% of their CAP funds to get young farmers started in the profession. Ladies and gentlemen, the upcoming European elections can't be used as an excuse to include negationist and protectionist measures from some organisations that are supporting the protests and who are ignoring the demands of the majority of farmers. We absolutely can't accept the problems in agriculture, calling into the question the goals of having agriculture that's compatible with the fight against climate change. Neither is it acceptable for the European Union to sacrifice trade agreements with third countries. What's necessary is to guarantee that production that comes from third countries is subject to the same production rules that we apply to our farmers in the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, agriculture and the environment can go hand in hand and must do so. We need to work to protect the environment. We need to be guided by science. We need to listen to the voices of farmers when it comes to the next phase of the Green Deal. And if we do that, the European project will engender one of the greatest successes of the last 70 years. Farmers are not the heritage of anyone. Let's get to work and resolve their problems. Thank you.
Gemeldet hat sich Frau Ulrike Müller.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Ulrike Müller. President, Commissioner, Vice President, we are witnessing the most major farmers' protests in Europe we've ever seen in recent years. And this is because farmers feel completely overwhelmed by the superfluity of strictures, measures and requirements, many of which are actually contradictory. They have falling incomes and they simply feel that politicians are patronising them and failing to engage. Strategic dialogue, President, does show an initial awareness of the issues at stake. But the problem is that the approach is completely inappropriate. Top-down and backroom deals is no way to connect, to engage with farmers who are taking to the streets in number. We should far rather structure dialogue on the basis of regional conferences, which would bring together farmers who could participate in discussing the relevant issues. Regional experiences are very important, and if we extrapolate from that the correct conclusions, we could come up with some genuinely constructive conclusions which would deliver reform for Europe. This is what we are proposing. Thank you very much.
Philippe Lambert.
Thank you very much, Philippe Lambert.
If you listen to the extreme right, the Conservatives, the Liberals, well, they say that the farmers' revolt can be blamed, can be blamed at the door of the European Green Deal and the environmental workerati. But maybe instead of stirring things up, we should listen to farmers, because farmers are trapped between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, landowners, seed producers, agri-chemical giants, equipment manufacturers and banks. Then on the other hand, you have agribusiness and retailers. But what has happened is that farmers have been a bargaining chip for years. Farmers are just receiving the crumbs of the CAP. 80% of the CAP money goes to industrial giants. They shouldn't even be called farmers. And they are the ones who say that they are the face of farming. It's as if IKEA said it was an artisan carpenter. So it's therefore no surprise that they are pointing their fingers at the Green Deal. But the Green Deal isn't even here yet. You're blaming the Green Deal, but you are the ones who are responsible. You, as the right, were in favour of a CAP which is only about producing, which is only about merchandise. You have gutted the nature restoration law. You don't care about reducing greenhouse gas emissions or reducing pesticides. But we need the Green Deal if we are to survive. Farmers are at the front line of climate change, and they know this better than you. But we won't make any progress without them, let alone working against them. We won't make any progress if this economic system causes them to commit suicide. These farmers end up killing themselves because they've been at it for years and years. You say that our environmental policy is punitive, but your economic system is punitive. It's just in favour of investors. What your agriculture does makes people sick. It strips people of their dignity and freedom. You are poisoning our air, our soil, what's on our plates and our lives on this planet. Your punitive economy is something that we are fighting against, that we have been fighting against for half a decade on democratic ground. Our environmental policy will help to recover so that we can all live on this planet, so that we can live on this planet, which is the only one we have.
Die nächste Sprecherin ist. Der nächste Sprecher.
The next speaker is Nicola Procaccini.
Grazie Presidente, Commissario.
Thank you, President. Commissioner. Well, I'm disappointed that Mr. Timmermans isn't in your place. He seems to have done a runner. Now, for years, we've been asking you to listen to us. We've fought hard in spite of not having the numbers to stop the green-red coalition that came up with this crazy Green Deal. Every 4 months, you brought in another law against farmers, stock breeders, fishermen, etc. And you said that we had to protect nature from them. And these are the people who have been living and working in the countryside for generations and generations. Farm to fork, you squashed them with that, and you promoted the consumption of larvae and insects. Then Nutri-Scores, you wanted to strike down the Mediterranean diet. Then there were regulations to stop fresh products being sold. Then you established that vegetables couldn't be called green or organic if they travelled by lorry. Then you declared war on wine and beef. You then made farming equipment equivalent to industrial installations. Left-wing governments in some countries even did away with the subsidies for the purchase of diesel. And then there were the nature restoration laws, which saw you deciding that human beings were destroying nature. We have to get rid of gravel in rivers and then restore swamps. And if things had gone the way that Greta Thunberg and others had wanted, then the CAP would have been even worse. And after all of that, what do you expect from farmers? Do you expect them to say thank you? They are the people who haven't been listened to. And now you're trying to do a U-turn, but it's too late. The minority has become a majority right across Europe. And in just a few months, we will put people in the place of ideology.
Mr. Marco Zanni, the floor is yours.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much indeed, President. A glass of wine is bad for your health, whilst insects are a panacea. Cheese is poison, but chicken could be good. Fishing is unnatural, but of course, if you're flying the flag of an EU member state, possibly not. Let's abandon organic cultures entirely. Maybe let's stop growing anything. Let's buy our cereals from the east because we need to leave our fields lying fallow. The approach that this Commission has been advocating and defending over the last 5 years is completely schizophrenic, and it's been supported by a majority here in Parliament. It's completely hypocritical in the face of war and in the face of the many other challenges for the policies that are being pursued to be pursued. And now finally an alarm bell is ringing loud and clear throughout Europe. The green policy of Timmermans and von der Leyen has been an absolute and utter disgrace, and it now falls to us both to correct it and to change it. We can't possibly run the risk of having a continent which is ever weaker, ever more divided, ever more torn apart by these initiatives. I agree with Mr. Lamberts, at least in one part. The Green Deal is a disgrace. But this is not the only reason that for which the farmers are out in the streets taking to the barricades. For years, the policies pursued by the EU have created this situation. And on top of it, we have this disgrace of a Green Deal, which have meant that no farmers can even cover their production costs. And this is actually why they're taken to the barricades and out in the streets. It's because their very survival is at stake. That's why they're protesting, because they can't even make ends meet from month to month. Then, of course, there are also political reasons too. If you look at the newspapers, you don't necessarily see all the ins and outs of it. These are provisions, though, which have not simply just come out of the blue. They're ideas, proposals which have been put forward deliberately by the political majority in this House, which supported the von der Leyen Commission in this endeavour. And this is something which you have to stand up and realise. And we can't have a future for the European Union which is based on this, because there are too many people who are looking at the end of the month with as much alarm as many would be looking at the end of the world. Thank you.
Sie sind am Wort.
The next speaker is Manon Humbry.
On est censé nourrir les gens.
We're supposed to feed people, but you leave us to die on our fields. That's what I heard from farmers when I met last week when they were protesting. They feel as if they're being left alone to die. Who is behind this? You. You were against basic prices for farmers. You swept away an option which would have reduced industry's profits. You are the ones who have signed free trade agreements, which means that there are unfair trading rules. You come out with great speeches for farmers with your hand on your heart, but then you sign a free trade agreement with New Zealand, so there will be more honey, wine, meat, cheese and dairy coming from the other side of the world, and they are producing with pesticides that we have banned. Hypocrisy reigns. We in Parliament are the only group that was firmly against all of these free trade agreements, as if that weren't enough. There are 2 more that you voted on last week with Chile and Kenya, respectively. When will you ever stop? Does our European farming community have to shrivel and die? And don't say that you have paused the Mercosur negotiations. No, it continues. And then there will be Mexico, Australia, India. How can our farmers be competitive against Brazil or Ukraine, which have factory farms? What is the point of bringing in goods from the other side of the world when we can produce these wholesome goods on our own soil? This is an attack on fishermen and women, farmers, growers, workers, those who feed us day in, day out. I recently met farmers who were asking for help. In 2023, they hadn't been able to sell anything. These beekeepers hadn't been able to sell any of their honey. These supermarkets preferred to buy Russian honey, Putin's honey. And so what are you going to say to these farmers and beekeepers? Are we going to continue with all this madness? Farmers won't be milked dry by the industry and by your obsession with signing free trade deals. If we continue on this path, then you will end our farming sector.
Giarrusso, das Wort.
The next speaker is Mr. Dino Giarrusso.
Presidente, gli agricoltori europei
Colleagues, President, European farmers are raising their voices. They're protesting. It's happening in Italy, Belgium. It's happening here, just outside this building. And there's a very simple reason for that. They cannot make ends meet. For years, decades, we've allowed large distribution chains to destroy the prices that farmers receive. Producers are producing at a higher cost than they manage to sell what they produce, and that's the key problem. And I think it shows bad faith if people say that protecting the environment goes against farmers. No, quite the opposite. We need to do that with farmers, because if we don't, farmers are going to face even greater problems. The truth is that there's a problem that relates to prices, on international competition and trade agreements, and the EU shouldn't be rethinking its environmental policy. It should be rethinking its trade policy if it really wants to support farmers. Every European region needs to receive the same contribution. A Sicilian farmer currently gets a third less than other Italian farmers, and that's unacceptable. Let's change these rules now.
Mr. Siegfried Muresan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, one of the greatest achievements of European integration is the quality of food in Europe. People in Europe trust food quality, they trust food safety, and at the center of this success is the European farmer. This is why we have the duty to listen to farmers in Europe. This is why we have the duty to support and to protect them. And of course, agriculture in Europe is modernizing. Agriculture in Europe has to modernize and to reform, as has every sector of our economy, as every part of our society. But we have to say clearly, we are modernizing agriculture with the farmers, not against the farmers. And my political family, the EPP, is ready to work with the majority here in the Parliament to do the following 7 things for farmers and agriculture. Firstly, no decision on agriculture without listening to farmers. Secondly, no decision without knowing the impact, and if there is any additional burden for the farmers, we have to be ready to provide more support. Thirdly, reducing bureaucracy for farmers. Farmers have to farm more than they report. Thirdly, secure the quality and the quantity of food production in Europe. We have to produce more food in Europe, not less. Number 5, invest in the rural areas as a whole. We want good schools, good hospitals. We are ready to invest in digitization, in greening, but also in infrastructure in the rural areas, in the villages. Number 6, help in times of crisis. If there is a crisis, we have to modernize we have to mobilize the European tools that we have, including crisis reserves, providing financial support. And number 7, help Ukrainian farmers by also helping our farmers absorb what we can in Europe, help Ukraine to export the other quantities to the other markets in the world where they are needed. We are ready to work with the majority in this House to achieve this for the farmers in Europe. Thank you very much.
Nun spricht Frau Clara.
And the next speaker is Clara Aguilera.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President, Vice President of the Commission, colleagues. We are facing a situation of crisis in the farming sector. Farmers and animal breeders are taking to the streets, crying out to be heard. They want us to have a debate with them, a proper debate. They have the impression that we are simply undervaluing their contribution to society. Wholesome food, high-quality food, environmental sustainability, rural cohesion. All these things are major contributions. and they feel that we're not recognising this. The real problem is that we have to be aware of the national dimension, but we've also got to have a proper European policy. Our tomatoes from Spain are excellent, despite what the French say. €5 per kilo is what they cost, but the producer is getting 70 cents rather than €5. And that is the heart of the problem, the fact that the farmers are not getting anything like a realistic price. Their costs are escalating. We are getting cheap imports from third countries. And these are the problems. It's not just the green agenda, which does have positives. This is really the issue. They don't have a fair income. And this is the responsibility of all of us, including the Commission. You've mentioned von der Leyen, you've mentioned Timmermans, and started castigating them. And you've also pointed out that the Commissioner for Agriculture hasn't even done us the courtesy of attending the debate.
Pascal Koffer.
The next speaker is Mr. Confin. Colleagues, well, we can pass the buck. Some say that environmentalism is to blame. Some say the Green Deal. Some say that retailers are to blame. No, we need to take the sting out of this debate, and we need to boil it down to 3 issues. 1, income. 2, the green transition. 3, the fight against unfair competition and the need to protect our farming sector. Can we do that? Can we compromise on the 3 issues I've just listed? If you want to blame the green transition and trade deals, it's pointless. And we can't have a Green Deal without involving farmers, because the biggest threat to farmers and incomes is climate change. But if we need to share value, we do have a law in France that makes it easier to share value, but that law is being bypassed because of other European countries. So let's not blame each other. Let's not try to find scapegoats, but let's try to have solutions.
Accept the blue card? Yes. Madame Aubry?
Yes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur.
Well, thank you, President. Mr. Confin, you said that pointing the finger at free trade groups won't change anything. Well, you voted in favour with your group with one of the recent trade agreements, the one with New Zealand, which, for example, is going to include the import of 15,000 tonnes 84 tonnes of beef, and all these goods that I mentioned are produced using pesticides like trazine, which are banned in the European Union but are allowed in New Zealand. So you really think that it won't change anything for farmers to continue to massively import all these products which contribute to unfair competition, do you?
Miss Aubry, as you know, when we voted on that deal, most of us were in favour of it, including the S&D and the Greens. And that's because it contains clauses which will help deal with climate change. And some of the clauses and provisions are favourable to our farming sector. However, we are fiercely opposed to Mercosur. And Emmanuel Macron last week spoke out clearly against Mercosur. If he hadn't done that, we would have Mercosur. And we would have Mercosur because of von der Leyen, because of Weber, because of the EPP. Why don't you point the finger at them?
Olay, the floor is yours. No. She had the second one? She's possible? No. She don't ask. You don't ask. No. You don't ask. Mr. Jordi Solé. No. I know the rules. Mr. Jordi Solé. I have no intervention. Mr. Jordi Solé, the floor is yours.
Gràcies, president.
To Mr. Jordi Solé, so it was a mistake from my side, but he has the floor.
No problem. Los agricultores y ganaderos tienen...
Farmers and livestock breeders have many and good reasons to demonstrate loss of competitiveness competitiveness, problems with exports. But let's not make this mistake. The problem is not the Green Deal, as the Conservative coalition constantly says with populist arguments. The problem is the economic structure, which is stacked against small producers. They're not receiving appropriate income, because we all know that with appropriate income, farmers would be the number one allies of the green transformation. And the reason that they're not getting appropriate income is the large retailers, large groups that oblige them to sell their goods at low cost, and also as a result of unfair competition from goods that come into the European Union without complying with the minimum requirements that EU producers have to comply with. And that's a result of your free trade agreements. Let's not be hypocritical here. Let's explain the true reasons why farmers are facing problems. Thank you.
Madame Beata Sidlo.
Thank you very much, President, Mr. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. We hear a lot of beautiful words. You are worried about the fate of European farmers who, as you have understood, have not come to Brussels last week or yesterday to Strasbourg to demonstrate. They have not been protesting in Germany for many weeks already. There will be another protest of farmers in Poland starting on Friday. They are not protesting in order to present their support for your policies, quite the contrary. It is very queer to hear the declarations of support for farmers when we hear them from the party of Mr. Weber or the Socialists. Who is responsible for what is happening now, for the crisis in agriculture, for doing away with the European agriculture? People are furious because it does not pay back to produce. It is your responsibility of Ms. von der Leyen, Mr. Timmermans. You can only say more beautiful words. Yesterday, the European Commission published a draft to curb emissions by 90%. Who will gain on that?
Herr Jaak Madison.
Thank you very much. First of all, some colleagues say that let's not accuse each other when we're looking for problems concerning agriculture. But I have a question. If we don't blame each other, then you, as if very conveniently, want to go over the real problems which have been caused in agriculture, and you do your propaganda for 4 months before elections, want to attract all the farmers and voters, and you say that you know best how to protect agriculture. I don't know how many of you were in the European Parliament in Brussels at the farmers' meetings. I was there. I didn't see any liberals or socialists there. I saw one communist. But most liberals, they were sitting inside the parliament. But I was talking to the farmers, and they had the same problems that conservatives have said for years. A Green Deal is destroying agriculture because with utopias and fantasies, you want to save the planet if only 6% of CO2 is caused in Europe. But you want to put this burden on farmers and others. And here in the audience, you very conveniently say how you're standing for farmers, but you're not doing this. With your idiocy, you're just destroying agriculture. Thank you very much.
Is Mr. Luke van Lanagan.
Farmers are protesting because, from their perspective, the just transition is just empty words. They are being required to meet ever higher standards, as they should, and more needs to be done, but their livelihoods are being undermined by imports from third countries that do not meet the same standards. In Ireland, the most sustainable producers of beef, the suckler farmers, are being paid to reduce their stock while we import beef from South America that is the other end of the rainbow when it comes to sustainability. Commissioner, you talk about help with sustainability while incentivising the destruction of a sustainable beef production model. The hypocrisy of those supposedly supporting the farmers needs to be called out. The centrist and right-wing groups in the European Parliament now extolling the virtues of the farming community are the same people who drove the trade liberalisation agenda that has brought us to this point. Every trade deal that further undermined the position of the food producer in the EU was enthusiastically supported and championed by you. And finally, you are wrong, Manfred Weber. Farmers can't depend on you. On your watch, food has been reduced to a commodity, to be traded around the world, exploited for profit by multinationals, instead of being valued as an essential human right and those who produce it.
Thank you
being
very
respected for work. You don't do that, and you're not.
So, Madame Maxette Bierbakas.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Commissaire.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, the agricultural crisis which we're facing today is very serious, absolutely. What we are experiencing is partly to be attributed to the actions taken within the institutions themselves, the initiatives taken by the Commission. And this is why our French and other farmers are so angry, and those in the ultra-peripheral regions are at least as angry. Too much is being imported into the European Union, far too much pollution is being generated, and you are simply swallowing the objectives of the Commission without questioning where this is actually going to lead. The free trade agreements which the European Union is signing are simply contributing to the hemorrhaging of agriculture on this continent. It should be a great wealth for Europe, and we should not be undermining it and throwing out the baby with the bathwater by importing products from other third countries. We need to respect and support farmers because we depend on their wholesome foodstuffs.
No, excuse me. Excuse me, it was the Mr. Dorfmann, Herbert.
Kolleginnen und Kollegen, was ist... Colleagues, what is sustainability? What is a sustainable farm? It's when you can hand a farm down from generation to generation. So there's an environmental part, but there's an economic part too. A farmer has got to be able to make ends meet. Why would a young person get into farming? Why would you accept that you should be a farmer earning less than someone working in an office? In nearly every EU country, the farming income is under the EU salary average. So we need to strengthen the economic side of farms. If farmers are going to plough their land, if farmers are going to grow, if they're going to set land aside, if they're going to look after animals, that should be their decision. We should leave it to them. And I was expecting some proposals from you today, Commissioner, but I didn't hear much from you. Now, we need thriving rural areas, and that includes the mountains. I'm from a mountainous area in Italy, and what we've seen there is that when farmers up sticks and leave, then others follow them, and then these communities are eroded. So we need them to stay there.
Herr Mohamed Chahim.
Thank you, Mr. Dorfman. Mr. Chahim now, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Beste vrienden, beste collega's.
Colleagues, friends, without subsidies, many farmers would be making a loss. This is an untenable situation for farmers, and it's true of eggs, apples, cereals, dairy sector. This is their daily reality. Transporters, bankers, retail industries are all pocketing profits at the cost of the farmers. And it is absolutely high time that we recognised that we can't be defending the interests of those who have at the costs of the farmers. The farmers have got to be central to the model for the future for Europe. And this is what the right has got to realise. You can't start blaming on on climate change, on the Green Deal, on the Nature Restoration Directive. We need all these things for our farmer because they need to have a good environment in order to produce wholesome, good quality food. That is what is necessary. But they also have got to be properly remunerated for what they are producing. And that is the piece of the jigsaw which is missing in this Parliament. Thank you.
Pane komisaři, kolegové, evropští politici si z našich zemědělců dělají léta.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, farmers have been turned into useful idiots. Subsidies haven't gone up for many years, but equipment, seeds, etc. costs a great deal more. But farmers' produce is still being sold at the same price as it was 10 years ago. You are stopping farmers using their land. It's cheaper to bring in produce from Ukraine and South America, the Green Deal as well. Farmers have reduced emissions by 22%. In the US, they've increased by 6%. In China, 24%. And in Brazil, they've gone up by almost 50%. And you say that now you want to talk to farmers now that they're in the streets. But where have you been for all these years? Shouldn't you have been doing things, acting? Thank you.
La colère qu'exprime.
The anger of farmers today is legitimate. But answer me, how can you defend farming when you defend the status quo, which is wrong? It destroys farmers. It concentrates power in the hands of a few, and it makes our food less healthy and makes food uncertainty greater. We've had enough of this hypocrisy. People who say, oh, we're in favour of farmers, but at the same time you're in favour of free trade agreements, which strangles farming. Mr. Confin, you are the face of this hypocrisy. Stop it. You have trapped farmers with pesticides. They are the victims of pesticide use, but they don't know how to wean themselves off them. Today, 20% of farms gobble up 80% of CAP funds, and you say that the environment is the problem? We need to fight back against industry. We need to fight back against those who carry out tax evasion, who make huge amounts of money. Those are the kind of things that we need to change today. Thank you.
Monsieur Buxade-Filalba, the floor is yours.
Gracias, presidente. Debería.
Thank you very much. You should be asking for forgiveness, but you are not doing so. There is far too much derision and scorn heaped upon the agriculture sector and farmers. And for the last several years, this Parliament has been voting in favour of the Green Deal. You have all been doing this, colleagues, and you are simply voting in favour of trade agreements, bringing in all kinds of imports, in favour of imports from Morocco, and all this is undermining Spanish agriculture. This is the backdrop of the past several years. Our workers on the field are simply being sacrificed on the altars of profit, and this is completely unacceptable. Ms von der Leyen and her colleagues have simply asphyxiated the rural environment. Their initiatives are simply massive redundancy plans for agriculture and for millions of families. And you knew exactly all too well what you were doing. And yet you went on to create these instruments which simply sacrificed our producers on the altar of your fine-sounding Green Deals. It is high time that you tore up the Green Deal. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have one blue card. Do you accept the blue card?
Sí. Gracias. El señor Buxade.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Buxade, you're asking this House to apologise for measures that have been taken by the whole House to benefit the farming sector. And I'd like to ask you whether you've asked your commissioner from your political family, the far right, about this, because he's not here in this debate. Have you asked him to apologise for all the things he hasn't done during this legislative term? I'd like you to apologise for constantly instrumenting, using the farming sector. What they need is more Europe, not less Europe, as you're calling for. They don't need less Europe, as you say. Farmers and fishermen need to be helped via measures that we adopt here.
Might I just reiterate that I did not vote in favour of the Green Deal. I did not vote in favour of the Farm to Fork strategy, nor the biodiversity, nor any of the trade agreements which have gone through this House and are simply bringing in masses of products from third countries. This is the grim reality. You voted for them. You voted for them. I didn't. We didn't. And now we're coming towards the elections. Everybody wants to be friends of the farmers. But I can tell you, you have a globalist agenda, and this is an agenda like the 2030 agenda, which is absolutely guaranteed to encourage and increase import.
Ich würde Sie jetzt bitten.
Your minute is over. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Let's not go over the top in terms of speaking time during this debate. I've let people go over their speaking time a little bit, but when it comes to a 1 minute time period, I can't give you more than 5 or 10 seconds extra because otherwise it's unfair. I have to treat everyone equally, and we're running late. So therefore, I'm going to have to do something about blue cards. I can only allow one question for 1 minute when it comes to a blue card. So please, let's stick to the rules. Let me now give the floor to Mrs. Limmer, please.
Once again, furious European farmers are protesting in front of the Parliament in Strasbourg, as was the case last week in Brussels. Do you need hay, slurry and eggs to be thrown at you for you to wake up? So we're not just talking about suspending set-aside rules, suffocating bureaucracy, Mercosur, unfair competition, organic quotas, livestock bans, or PPP bans. The list goes on, the list goes on. It's not just about that. Farmers are just fed up of your ivory tower policy making with your Green Deal and your handouts. They don't want to be caught up in your idiotic attempts to save the climate and to turn them into carbon farmers. Industry can just up sticks and leave, but farmers grew up on their land and they won't give up and leave it. And they won't be ignored anymore either.
Das Wort gebeten hat Herr Chris McManus.
Mr. McManus now, please.
Vice President, Commissioner, I want to express solidarity with family farmers who are feeling the pain of inflation, fuel costs, competitions with imports from outside the EU and general lack of fair prices. These mounting challenges, while they are being asked to do more, has reached a breaking point for many who are more concerned than ever for their family farm's future. This was evident in the anger seen last week. But these protests did not happen in isolation. Many of our farmers feel abandoned. Many have lost faith in the system, a system that has burdened them with unfair free trade agreements they can't compete with. And as rural custodians, they are expected to carry a large share of green initiatives like the Nature Restoration Law. They must be duly compensated for such efforts, and concerns such as forestry wetting must be listened to. And I call on the Irish Government in any future national restoration plan to commit to such issues. Thank
you, Mrs. Tiziana Begin now, please.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Our farmers' income has collapsed for two reasons, essentially. Firstly, because they're suffering from unfair competition from low-cost products that come from the other side of the world, and also because our industry provides an advantage to large distribution. A kilo of apples is today sold in supermarkets for not less than €2.10, but producers get just 29 cents. That's the main problem. The environment has nothing to do with it. Now, for a long time, the Five Star Movement has been criticising trade policies that sacrifice agriculture. We voted against CETA, that facilitated the import of Canadian low-cost grain, and we've always been against the EU Mercosur agreement that would have damaged our fruit and vegetable sector. We need to hold our hands out to farmers and build fair trade, which is in line with their interests. It's only thus that we can safeguard our excellence and guarantee a future to our farmers. Thank you.
Now to Norbert Linz.
Thank you. Mr. Norbert Linz, please.
Herr Vizepräsident.
President, Vice President, it's a good thing that farmers in Europe are taking to the streets to protest at the current policies. It's often a question of national governments taking the wrong decisions. My own government, for example, which has failed to understand what the rural communities are and has simply pursued policies suitable for urban communities. But it is important for us to take responsibility too. The reality is that we've got Timmermans' ideology-driven agenda behind all our policy initiatives, and we need to abandon that and shift the dial back to a more realistic and appropriate strategic policy. I am disappointed, though, that the members of the farming community are in the streets demonstrating in the way they are, and we have nothing to propose to them. We've got to put a stop to so many of the problems that they experience. We've got to cut red tape. We've got to ensure that they can actually produce the products they want, that they have less bureaucracy, that they can actually produce the food that we need and the things that they want to produce.
Stop. Mr. Herr Linz, wait a moment, but I have a blue card from Robert Bronis, but I will ask you, you are also on the list of Catch the Eye. What is your priority, the blue card or Catch the Eye? The blue card, good. Please, take your question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, indeed, you have already mentioned that, but legal acts, regulations and directives allow member states to make the conditions even stricter and to impose stricter regulations. What is your opinion? Shouldn't member states pay for this? Shouldn't we include a provision that if a member state imposes stricter conditions that increase expenses, bring in their own money there? Thank you.
Ja, vielen herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much for that question. I have every sympathy with the need for European legislation to be one in, one out. And I do understand, of course, that transposition into national legislation sometimes requires regional governments' involvement as well, and it can go beyond what was legislated for in the EU. But if you're talking about leaving land fallow, this is something which we had initially proposed should be 4%. We really can't just keep passing the buck and the cost is always borne by the farmers. Thank you.
Mr. De Castro, please.
Presidente Šefčovič, onorevoli colleghi.
President Šefčovič, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Now, for 20 years, we have ensured that our agricultural sector is the best in the world in terms of sustainability, respecting workers' rights, etc. But the current parliamentary term has moved from pursuing excellence to pursuing ideology, and we don't have any plan to support farmers in the transition towards new productive models. This Parliament, however, has tried to listen to rural communities, working to find clear and balanced solutions, far better ones than those that have been proposed by the Commission, also just recently. We need to re-establish the link between the EU and our farmers, and in order to do that, we need to give them ownership of a project that provides innovative tools based on sustainable new biotechnologies, so that we can ensure that we can achieve ambitious environmental goals and make our sector more competitive at the global level. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. De Castro. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Commissioner. And now, Mr. Katainen, you have the floor.
Arvoisa
Puhemies, President, having been a farmer myself, I know that you leave a farm to the next generation in a better shape than it was when you received it. As decision makers, we have to behave in the same way and do our utmost to improve the competitiveness and attractiveness of the agricultural sector. There is a limit to how much more we can demand from farmers without guarantees of a livelihood. Ultimately, it boils down to food security in the whole of Europe. Comprehensive impact assessments are needed as well for present legislation as for incoming regulations. We have to avoid overlapping legislation and administrative burden. Furthermore, we will have to assess the directive on unfair trading practices, its effectiveness in the member states, and how to further reinforce the directive so that the position of farmers in the food chain can be improved. Farmers have to get a better price for their produce, and we have to stick to the CAP financing. I hope that the Commission will take farmers' distress seriously in its future proposals.
The
next speaker is Mr. Häusling.
Ja, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Colleagues, I have a lot of sympathy for farmers who are protesting. We don't need to burn anything there. But things are terrible. Prices are falling. And the final blow is the difference between the farm gate price and the price that retailers sell at. We need to deal with that. Farmers depend on subsidies now, and that can't continue. Norbert Lintz, let me respond to you. Say a few words about the CAP. You've ensured that 2/3 of CAP money is land-based, area-based. The big holdings continue to get a lot of money. And now you, Norbert Lintz, say that this was the biggest CAP reform since McSherry, and now you're saying it's a bad reform. You always celebrate when environmental measures are scrapped, but no, environmental measures are needed. If you are in favour and celebrate the removal of environmental measures, then you are against farming.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Bourgeois. Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, the EU treaty guarantees that the farmers have the right to a reasonable standard of living, but this policy is failing. Our farmers are entitled to get a proper price for a good quality product. But our family farmers are powerless in the market, especially vis-à-vis the big players in the food production chain. The Commission has got to provide now some guidelines to ensure that farmers can actually operate on a basis of some kind of legal certainty and a system which involves them in price setting. We have to realise, colleagues, that sustainability is not just ecological, but also economic. The Commission has produced an absolute avalanche of rules completely at variance with the principle of proportionality. You need to review this. There needs to be a proper impact assessment, both at regional and at local level, as well as national level. And the farmers have got to have an entitlement to a proper income and proportional rules. Thank you. The next speaker is now Mr. Go.
Thank you, President. Well, our farmers are in a dramatic situation, and that's the result of political choices that have been made in Brussels and voted on here in Strasbourg. The free trade agreement with Chile voted on in committee 2 weeks ago is an example of that, and the pro-Macron forces are voting in favour of them. Now, quite apart from the distress that our farmers face, this is a crisis of society. Farmers are passionate about their jobs, and they have often been working their land for generations. They have a clear link with nature and traditions, and they want to pass this on to their children. This is a traditional, ancestral world that has forged society, and this goes fully against what the European Union wants to impose on us, the form of society which is ultra-liberal and globalist. And that's why the crisis that Europe is facing is something that will continue. And it's because of that that support for our farmers is massive, and that's why Macron is afraid. He's using the military police with armoured vehicles to stop tractors. But this is a popular revolt. It's quite right for them to be revolting, and it's based on values that have lasted for generations. There are two opposing models here, and on our side, we made our choice a long time ago. Everything shows that we are right. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a request from Mr. Clergeau to have a blue card, but I also have a lot of others too, and therefore, Mr. Clergeau, I would prefer to ask you just to take the floor later on at your appropriate point in the speakers list.
Köszönöm szépen, tisztelt kollégák! Az elmúlt hetek gazdatüntetései jól igazolják és jól mutatják, hogy a jelenlegi brüsszeli vezetés tévúton jár, és örülünk, hogy itt van Šefčovič alelnök úr, de itt van...
Well, the leadership in Brussels is on the wrong path. We should have Mrs. von der Leyen here. Actually, she is ultimately responsible for all this stuff: war in Ukraine, migration, farming, agricultural policy. It's clear that Brussels is being led and doing things on the basis of ideology. It doesn't have the interest of the people at heart. Now, these green measures are ruining European farmers, and Brussels is bringing in cheap Ukrainian grain, which is flooding European markets, and is also negotiating free trade agreements which put non-European countries in a better position than European countries. What kind of policy is that? Brussels is going along in the wrong direction and is benefiting our competitors. The US and China are implementing protectionist measures. We should do the same. The Brussels leadership need to work in favour of European citizens and give up its ideology-based policy. It's time for a change in Brussels. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, would you respect your speaking time, colleagues? The next speaker is Mr. Zoido. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, President. Last week, many people were alarmed to see what was going on in the square and the streets outside Parliament, full of tractors and protesting farmers. The Commission has at least capitulated to some small extent in the face of the demands of the farmers, and has said that it will review some of the most extreme provisions in the Green Deal, and we welcome that. But we do also feel that there is still a lot of work to be done to deal with this legacy of Mr. Timmermans. We have to protect the farmers and the breeders in Europe, and we've got to have much more flexible criteria on which the CAP is based. Clearly, we have to address drought. Clearly, we have to have mirror clauses to deal with unfair competition. That in itself will not be enough, but it's at least if we begin with that, we will get somewhere. Mr. Zoido, there's a blue card for you from Mr. Wiener, Ms. Wiener, who doesn't actually have a place on the speakers list, and therefore I shall give her the floor.
Vielen Dank. Ich warte, bis Sie den
Thank you. I'll just let you put your headphones on. Right.
Thank you. Vielen Dank für den Beitrag.
Thank you for what you've just said. But it was your party that is in favour of the CAP and land-based payments. These are industrial measures. You're in favour of these industrial measures. This means that small farmers aren't on a level playing field. Now you're criticising environmental measures. But what's your alternative on the pesticide reduction issue? These pesticides affect our soil, our water, make them less able to produce. And this isn't what people want. Please wake up and listen to what society is saying, to what farmers are saying, so that they don't have to be dependent on these expensive inputs.
Wenn Sie eine Frage haben wollen.
So, if you want a concrete question, do you agree with me or not? We need to protect farmers, do we not?
Zoido, prego.
Mr. Zoido. Thank you. First of all, could I say that the European People's Party is quite clear that we need to continue to improve the quality of our products. We need to tackle climate change, and we need to do so on the basis of evidence-based policy, not ideology. That's the first thing. And there's no point in beginning with ideology when you're dealing with technical and scientific reports. Could I also say that I think what Mr. Timmermans has said and done is very, very serious. The farm-to-fork strategy was presented to us without the technical report on which it was based, and this included a lot of information which, had we had it, would have changed the parameters considerably and would have shown how much the input costs were going to escalate, and the fact that we wouldn't necessarily achieve the quality which we wanted, and that we would have many challenges from lower quality products from out with the EU. The EPP wants a focus on farmers. Their demands are absolutely right and just, and it's high time that they were treated with respect and not simply as some kind of ideological add-on. Colleagues, could I please call you to order and ask you once again to respect your speaking time? Ms. Carvalho.
Caros colegas.
Dear colleagues, the first thing I want to say today is that I express solidarity with farmers, particularly young farmers. Regardless of their member state, these farmers are fighting for something simple: dignity, recognition of their way of life. They're fighting for a decent income from an activity that we all depend on, and they're also fighting for less red tape when accessing funds. I also want to pay tribute to small farmers, small livestock producers. There's a lot of them in Europe, but often they find it difficult to access CAP funding. So this fight belongs to them. This is not the fight of the right or the far right. The right proclaims to be the saviour of farmers, but the right actually polarizes the debate and pits farmers against each other. So this fight belongs to the rural world. Rural communities deserve respect, and we need to come up with measures that will help farmers so that they can become more sustainable. These farmers love their land, and we mustn't pit farmers against nature. Thank you.
Mr. Cholos.
În ultimele săptămâni, fermieri.
Over the past few weeks, the farmers have taken to the streets in many European countries because they have lost their patience. The causes are well known: the energy and post-pandemic crisis, the war in Ukraine, and the impact of the green policies without a calibration in agriculture. How can we overcome this situation? How can we align the European ambitions with the capacity of the farming sector to adapt? All the discussions about supporting the farmers on the short term make no sense unless we draw some conclusions from the mistakes we have made over the past few years. We really need a project that includes the need for affordable and healthy food and the need for a clean environment, but also reasonable and predictable incomes for the farmers. We haven't done this well enough so far, and we can already see the results in an unpredictable context for the farmers. The derogations of the Commission on the short term are good, but they will not solve the problem on the long term. The role of the Commission is crucial over the following weeks and months in order to make decisions that send a clear signal. It is capable to listen to the farmers' concerns for a fair income in order to take into account the environment and food production.
Thank you, Ms. Metz.
Dear President, dear Commissioner, our food system is broken. Multinationals are making billions while farmers struggle to make ends meet. Extremely low prices, family farms disappearing every day. We are in an agricultural crisis. To the farmers protesting outside, we are not your enemy. We Greens know that without farmers there is no food, and that farmers deserve to make a decent living. We all also know that without nature there is no farming. What has led to this crisis are the policy pushed by the very people who like to blame us Greens. More and more free trade agreements, an unfair common agricultural policy, and simply not enough support to help farmers through the transition. Here is what we need to do. Stop unfair competition from imported food, break the power of big corporations, more support to small farmers, less bureaucracy. Let's give farmers workable solutions that protect nature without burying farmers in paperwork. Thank you very much.
Grazie, onorevole. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Roos. The farmers' protests are continuing throughout the entirety of Europe. As we can see, the Green Deal was created by Frans Timmermans in order to make life impossible for farmers in Europe, and the jewel in the crown was his Nature Restoration Act. Finish off the Netherlands now, the Dutch people last. Now you can see, once again, the farmers are taking to the street, and the Christian Democrats are suddenly wakening up to reality and chucking all these anti-farmer proposals into the wastepaper basket. But they've been supporting all these ideas for the last 5 years. They hadn't actually clocked that food security is national security, and the European Union has got to stop having so much red tape, which simply constrains their freedom to produce. All the farmers throughout the entirety of Europe are noticing what is going on. I had hoped in the Nature Restoration Directive that my amendments, my improvements, would actually remain. But now they've all been re-edited out. And the only conclusion that we can draw here is that the interests of the farmers are being completely abandoned. Thank you.
Throughout Europe and in Greece, the grand mobilization of the farmers blame the CAP of the EU and the green transition. This have become the ways to destroy all farmers. The farmers have arrived here at the European Parliament at the scene of the crime, whereby here in Greece everybody, with the exception of the Communist Party of Greece, have voted everything that has destroyed them. They are being thrown away from their land and from their place. They do not have the privileges in fuel like the Greek ship owners do. They are not being damaged for the disasters they suffered from the flooding of their land. And while they sell their produce at minimum prices, others earn millions, and so we have to stand by the farmers who fight for their living.
Mr. Fernandez.
President, colleagues, farmers are protesting, and they are right to do so. We must listen to their cries of help, and we must take subsequent action. Farmers deserve our help, and I want to turn to the Council. You've squandered an opportunity. You were supposed to be revising the MFF. You could have boosted funding for farmers, but what did you do? You cut the CAP. And that is completely unacceptable. We need less red tape, and we need a legislative framework that is more stable. The European Union and the Commission must do its bit, as must we in the Parliament. And then, of course, it's up to the Member States too. And there is drought, but the Member States aren't using the measures that are available to deal with this drought. They could use the RRF money to support farmers in their fight against the drought. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Neukel.
Liebe Kolleginnen, liebe Kollegen.
Colleagues, for a long time, agricultural policy is no longer a niche area, it's social policy. Now, I voted in favour of the Green Deal because it's the right thing to do now. I also understand what farmers are asking for. I mean, they're worried. What's going to happen when they have to reduce the use of pesticides? What's going to happen to my farm if I'm a farmer and my income? But at the same time, it's important to say that society is also wondering what's going to happen. What's going to happen if we don't reduce pesticides? What happens if we lose more biodiversity? So we have to look at both sides. I'm grateful to my political group that we've constantly managed to find a political balance, because agricultural policy is social policy. And the EPP now are saying, well, they need to protect farmers from Brussels. Well, I would say that we have other difficulties as well. Climate change. We need support for farmers, but the EPP is trying to split society from farmers, whereas we need to fill the gap between them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. de Serre. Thank you very much indeed, President. Commissioner, European agriculture is already one of the best production systems, and our farmers are complying with some of the most stringent rules the globe over. There are too many people here who are simply trying to polarize the debate in an unhelpful way and to find a scapegoat. But I think we should actually be focusing on trying to find responses, solutions. This is what farmers expect and wish from us. We want them to stop making decisions without involving them. They want proper responses. They want real, tangible solutions to what is a difficult situation. They want to be able to earn a decent living. This is actually a big challenge, but it can be addressed properly if we are serious-minded, rational and coherent in our approach. If, for example, the Commission really does launch a strategic dialogue worth its name and doesn't simply sacrifice it on the altar of commercial trade agreements such as Mercosur, that would simply perpetuate a type of agriculture we don't wish to continue to see. You have a blue card, Mr. de Serre. Are you prepared to take it, Mr. Bellamy?
Dear colleague, you're saying you don't want to polarize the debate. But do you remember when you voted in favour of the nature restoration law and you criticised us because we said, look, this law is going to mean that there's 10% less agricultural land. And what about farm to fork, which you were in favour of? We said that we didn't want to import something that we didn't produce ourselves. But you also in favour of New Zealand. We were against that because it would bring tons of products in that we can produce ourselves. 30,000 tons of sheep meat. Milk powder too. Milk powder that we wouldn't produce in that way here in Europe. You need to look yourself in the mirror. Look at what your group is doing. If we want to defend the agricultural community, then we have to be truthful too.
Mr. Bellamy, I of course take full responsibility for the way I voted in the various votes which I participated in this Parliament. I know what I've voted on, and I know where we have perhaps now realised the error of our ways in the past. But what I know is that the farmers are not interested in scapegoats, they want answers. So if you want to go on arguing about who voted for what in the past because of this, that and the next thing, farm to fork, the Green Deal, whatever, it's all the blame of the Greens because they always want too much, then fine, we can all have a school playground argument like that. But I'm saying let's call a halt to all that. Let's build on the good ideas we've got. I'm sure you have some, we have some. I think everybody has got some good ones. So do the Republicans. Let's come together and put together a decent future for farmers and agriculture at long last. Thank you. Ms. Sander.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
President, Commissioner, today farmers are at the heart of our debate. Alas, it's a shame that they had to get on their tractors and take to the streets. That was needed for us to focus on them. Apparently, we didn't see this crisis coming. Well, on the left here, the Macron supporters turned a blind eye, and we have just gone for more and more regulation. Then if we look at the National Rally and the extreme right, They're absent. But we in the EPP have long spoken up for the farming community, being the mouthpiece, talking about their despair. But now we must urgently act. We need to press pause on new rules and regulations. We need to have mirror clauses. We urgently need to simplify the CAP. We need to look again at the 4% set-aside rule. We must act so that we can ensure food security throughout the continent.
There's a blue card from you, from Ms. García Muñoz.
Señora Sander, las legítimas protestas.
Well, thank you, President. The legitimate protests of farmers have led to disputes between French farmers and Spanish lorry drivers transporting Spanish goods, and this is worrying. Now, we need to maintain the single market, and also we're concerned about lorry drivers. Now, is the right way for French farmers to be throwing Spanish goods out of lorries? I mean, is the French government going to allow this to continue to happen? Shouldn't France take the responsibility for its own agricultural policy? Thank you.
Vous avez raison dans...
You're right. When we look at this debate, when we look at this farming crisis, part of the blame is at the national door, but part of it is at the European door too. In France, our farmers are dealing with additional problems because of so-called gold plating. But should we have the same rules throughout Europe? We see that farmers don't comply with the same rules. They don't have the same rules, which leads to further problems. And that means that farmers aren't on an equal footing. Let's ensure that the rules are the same within Europe, but also in the rest of the world.
Prego.
Mr. Clergeau, please.
Chers collègues,
colleagues, the environment is not the enemy of agriculture. The enemy of agriculture is liberalism. Liberalism has led to a reduction in farmers' revenue, farmers' income. Income. That should be what's at the heart of our debates. And in order to do that, we need a CAP that's different, because unpredictable and deregulated markets is a system that doesn't work. But we can change the implementation of the CAP by putting a ceiling on assistance, on aid, to help the smaller farmers. And we can also fight against the deregulation of the markets and speculation. There needs to be a redistribution of value which guarantees income for farmers. We need to suspend free trade agreements and bring mirror clauses and the CBAT in, and we also need to help farmers to protect the environment from pesticides and glyphosate. We need to help the environment, but there needs to be more income for farmers. Thank you. Mr. Christensen, please.
Jeg er landmand, og jeg har støvlerne på, herr kommissær. I hele Europa der demonstrerer landmændene med deres traktorer. Det er fordi, at usikkerheden er meget.
And we have to recognize that there is huge financial uncertainty and economic and social uncertainty amongst farmers. Fuel inputs have risen. The environmental constraints are greater. The levies are taking their toll on the farmers. We understand all this. It's high time that we took some time out. Of course, environmental change is necessary, but all this has simply taken place at a pace that is unrealistic. There's far too much red tape bearing upon the farmers, and as Ursula von der Leyen said herself, there should be a 25% cut in red tape, and there needs to be a review to make sure that we find the right solutions, green solutions, yes, but realistic solutions for farmers. We have, of course, to ensure that biopesticides can be approved more rapidly so that they can be used rather than others. And implementation enforcement is, of course, key. Thank you.
Van der Candelare, prego.
Mr. van der Candelare, please.
Commissaris, voorzitter, collega's.
Commissioner, President, how many times have we debated the conditions that we're going to impose on farmers in recent years, and how many times have we actually debated the situation of farmers themselves? How many times has the European People's Party said that we should be speaking with the farmers rather than about the farmers? And I'd have to say, if you talked with the farmers, you wouldn't be surprised at all the protests that are breaking out. Of course, we need to have climate policy, but it's degenerated into a plethora of rules, and we've basically placed the farmers' hands tied behind their backs, battling with a brutal global market. We have supported industry and we've supported other policy areas, but not agriculture and food production. As far as I'm concerned, strategic agriculture dialogue ought to lead to an agricultural protection law. And this should be based on fundamental criteria which could have a bearing on food security. I'm thinking, for example, of availability of quality soils, of bringing more young people into the farming sector, innovation, being able to get proper prices for your products, availability of water, and so forth. Farmers have to be in the central place that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Everham now, please.
În titlul dezbaterii de azi,
in the title of today's debate, we find an interesting word, fair. What's fair when the value of grain in the EU has decreased by 30%? The Commission comes up with a derogation obliging farmers to double the surfaces that are object to new environmental conditionalities. Farmers say, but that will double our losses because we know very well that some of the crops that were recommended to plant won't survive without pesticides. Others need lots of water in summertime when there's usually a drought. The Commission constantly tries to patch an ever-unraveling tapestry. It's really difficult for us to understand why, even now, it's still unclear that for farmers, fair means something that's decided together with them, not without them. Now, this might sound absurd, but for new ambition, you need new money.
Thank you. Mrs. Alieva-Vili, please.
Госпожо председател, колеги, бурните протести на земеделците в цяла Европа са показателни. Те искат да...
Colleagues, there are loud farming protests throughout Europe, but that sends us a message. Farmers are desperate to be heard. Complex requirements, investments, unfair competition. All of this means that farmers are grappling with greater and greater challenges. But let's be clear. The farming sector is disappearing and there's less money. But I have said on many occasions that we need appropriate funding. Let's do that today. Now, on the subject of red tape and red tape reduction, there needs to be action following in the footsteps of promises. We need to work with farmers so that they can then solve their problems. Commission representative, Council, the issue of payments and the same payments for everyone needs to be looked at. So that there's more money for Bulgarian farmers.
Please stick to your speaking time, because otherwise we're not going to be able to hear from all our catch.
Dear colleagues.
Stradă. Le știm cu toții provocările. Inflație, secetă, războiul din Ucraina, iar politicile verzi, și subliniez, stimați colegi, care sunteți tributari acestor politici, îngenunchează sectorul. Lacrimile politicienilor vărsate în mod ipocrit.
These policies have brought the sector to its knees. Whatever measures we discuss, we won't do anything unless we really make the changes that need to be made. Commissioner, you came up with a derogation, but it doesn't solve the problem because the crops that are about to be planted would cause damages rather than benefits. We asked for money for the crisis reserve. Now, at the last minute, we ask you to simplify the PAC rules, the CAP rules. A farmer cannot understand how someone from Brussels can tell them when to plant or what to do with their land. I ask all of you to be honest partners to our farmers, not to turn the Brussels politicians into a risk factor for farming, because that's what you're doing today if you promote environmental policies without listening to farmers.
Thank you. Mr. Kefalogiannis, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, the CAP, which is the most successful EU policy during the last 30 years, what do our farmers claim? A decent income, reduction of the fuel and power cost. They want to top up to restore the losses of their income. Yes, they are right. What do they contribute? A guaranteed security of food and provision of food. So we need a strategy for that. I propose the creation of a new fund for the fair transition to support the income of farmers, just as we did with the Green Deal. Yes, we are in favor of the protection of climate, but always on the side of European.
Thank you. Mrs. Niebler now, please.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Well, thank you, President, Vice President, Council Representative, ladies and gentlemen. Well, for weeks now, farmers have been on the streets, quite rightly. Too much is too much. They've had enough. When it comes to agricultural policy, our line has always been that we're going to craft policy with farmers rather than against them. Now, we ensured that the pesticides regulation didn't get through, and we ensured that there shouldn't be any more set-aside, and we've also ensured that wood chips can be used as sustainable fuel. Now, we need farmers, ladies and gentlemen, who are happy in their jobs and who look after our countryside. These are people who live in rural areas, and they pass their land on from generation to generation. Our farmers should be respected. They shouldn't simply be restricted in everything they do. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's now move on to Catch the Eye. We're not going to be able to accept all requests for the floor because there are so many people who've asked for the floor that we just haven't got time. So anyone who's had a blue card intervention won't be able to take the floor. Mr. Bogovic, please.
Thank you very much for the floor. In spring of last year, I joined the Slovenian farmers who started protesting. These protests were aimed against dumb measures coming from the EU. Back then, we realized what the Sustainable Use Regulation and the Nature Recovery Regulation meant. We together protested against those measures. For the first time, I protested against the EU measures because we went too far. The Slovenian farmers were protesting against the measures by the Slovenian government. These Slovenian measures only strengthened and worsened certain European measures that had not been yet adopted in the European Parliament. This same government, Slovenian government, wants to limit the use of wood for heating in rural areas. Farmers are protesting also against the current supply chains and distribution chains. We have to listen to the farmers. We have to find common solutions, not just discuss an added value burden.
That was a guess. Well, we face a clear truth here. I mean, had farmers been respected, if their work had been respected, well, we probably wouldn't have seen all these demonstrations right across Europe, the latest ones in Brussels and Strasbourg. Now, the problem is not the green transition or the need to preserve the environment, because actually it's farmers who are the first ones to protect the environment. They live off the environment. The problem is the ideological environmental choices that are being made. They're not based on scientific evidence. They're not providing an alternative, and they're causing problems for an entire economic system. So our path can't simply be to go for lab-grown meat or not gathering crops because they shouldn't be harvested. We should respect the environment, yes, but we should also respect farmers and their work. Thank you. Mr. Yar now, please.
Onorevole Yar.
Frau Präsidentin.
President, Vice President. Shouting in the room.
Yeah. But we press the button at first. That's your problem. I stay here since the beginning of the meeting.
Just a minute, colleagues. Just a minute.
I also press the button in the beginning. Oh, I don't know.
Onorevole Batman,
I'm not
avrà
guilty.
la
Okay.
parola.
I'm going to give you the floor, Mrs. Vautman. You will get the floor. We're going by political group. And as you can see, you will get the floor. We're moving in political group order. Please be patient. Let's stay calm. And let's hear from our speakers. Mr. Yar, please.
Frau Präsidentin, Herr Vizepräsident.
President, Vice President, the Commission is saying the following. We want to support farmers, but farmers feel looked down upon rather than being a solution. And now you're saying that the Structural Dialogue Forum is going to be the solution, but it really has to work this time. There needs to be trust, and that would include suspending the set-aside rule as long as the war in Ukraine goes on. Change the Basic Act and get rid of this set-aside requirement. Then there needs to be a program which buys up Ukrainian grain. Then we export that grain to North Africa. So we need open structural dialogue which focuses on providing solutions.
Thank you. Mrs. Grappini, please.
Doamna președintă,
Madam President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, we have a key priority with the farmers in the street, and the Agriculture Commissioner is not here. How can we debate on priority topics for agriculture if the Commissioner is not here? Thank you, Vice President, for being here. The President is not here either because she doesn't participate in priority debates. Dear colleagues, we need solutions to these problems. We are proud of the agricultural sector, but are they proud of us for what we do for them? Commissioner, we said we must find solutions, but the solutions are clear. During the crisis, we have to increase the budget. We must urgently revise the CAP. We speak about fairness, but subsidies are not equal in all member states. We speak about fairness, but in the Netherlands, they consume 8 grams per hectare of pesticides, whereas in my country, the consumption is 600. We cannot speak about fairness if we eat locusts and insect meal. Farmers want natural agriculture, consumers want the same.
Prego.
Thank you, Mr. Eisel.
Ja som veľmi rád, že je tu aspoň pán Ševčovič, keď pani predsednička van der Leyenová nemala odvahu tu zostať s nami. Rastúce...
We need to recognize that Ms. von der Leyen has not had the courage of any convictions, and she has not stayed here for this debate. We have seen many protests on behalf of the farmers, and of course the reality in this House is that everybody is looking to the elections in June. The farmers are pressurizing members of Parliament. The members of Parliament want to be re-elected. Okay, the farmers are not a very large percentage of the population, but we can't use that as a reason to ignore their demands, because their demands are actually more than well justified. They have great difficulties in the normal course of events, but the repercussions from the Ukraine war have been huge for them, and the escalation in their fuel and inputs costs have been a big struggle for them to deal with. On top of that, they're now threatened with all the trade agreements which have been signed and the floods of cheap sub-quality goods which are going to be coming into the European Union. I welcome the fact that the Commission has at least decided to suspend the...
Thank you, Mr. Olekas. Please stick to 1 minute, because otherwise we won't be able to give everyone the floor, please.
Thank you, President, Honourable Vice President, representatives of the Council. I'm happy that you heard the demands of the farmers when they came with the tractors and now are beginning a strategic dialogue. But what are your words and commitments worth if you don't fulfill them? When Lithuania was joining the EU back in 2004, we were told that external convergence, direct payments, will be evened out in 10 years. Now, 20 years later, there's no external convergence. Therefore, I'd like to call upon all of you and to draw your attention to the fact that if we want to talk to farmers and to fulfill our promises, we first of all must fulfill the promises given previously. And the EPP, the Greens, and the Commission Vice President and the Council representative, we must fulfill the commitment, our commitments to the Baltic and Lithuanian farmers, and only then solve other problems.
Badisco.
Thank you. Mrs. Votmans now, please. And let me just say...
Data a tutti. C'è bisogno di calma e serenità. Prego, lei la parola.
Wel, mevrouw de voorzitter, en ik ben eigenlijk...
Thank you, Madam President. I'm glad that we've had this debate here this morning, and indeed yesterday morning we also discussed what the farmers are demanding. They are taking to the streets saying, listen to us, we can't continue to live like this, we can't eke out any sort of living. The Belgian presidency under Alexander De Croo and Ursula von der Leyen clearly recognised last week in Brussels that something had to be done, and they took some steps to getting rid of some of the red tape and also the obligations to leave some of your land lying fallow. I think that most of the groups can support this, but we need to go further. The other thing that is absolutely necessary, and I remember you saying, Mr. Bourgeois, we've got to have an impact assessment. We've got to have an impact assessment of all this whole lasagna of legislative provisions that have a bearing on farmers. We've got to look at unfair competition, for example. We've got to look at all the other aspects of policy which take a toll on farmers and give them the respect they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wieczyk.
Grazie. Poľnohospodárstvo potrebuje pomoc. Sústreďme sa preto naozaj na užitočné a efektívne riešenia. Riešme férové ceny.
Well, farmers need help, and we need effective solutions to help them. So appropriate prices, ensuring fair competition. We need to look at the effects that imports are having. I mean, let's not use the wrong arguments here. I mean, we've heard an awful lot of things here today. I mean, people are saying that protecting the environment goes against farmers' interests. I mean, we've heard all sorts of things. The Commission has acted in certain ways as well. On set aside, we need to deal with that. And we also need to make sure that critical species continue to exist, but also we continue to produce the produce that's necessary. So we need to act against all the things we're hearing that aren't appropriate.
It seems that here in this chamber, everybody is on the side of the farmers. Good for them. But where were you in 2020 when we environmentalists were saying that you should reject the Mercosur agreement? Or where were you in 2021 when we said that the new CAP would require more resources for farmers and less for agribusiness? Now you're climbing over each other, shoving each other out of the way to get photographs with the demonstrating farmers and their tractors. But what are you doing about agribusiness? If you really want to support farmers, then you need to put forward some proper proposals. You need to tax agribusiness and massive retailers who are operating to the detriment of farmers. You need to reject the Mercosur trade agreement, and you need to address the whole supply chain in the farm sector. You can't have a sector which is operating to the benefit of 20% of mass retail and nobody else.
Mr. Ilčić, please.
Poštovani kolege, mi s ovog dijela političkog spektra već godinama govorimo da je vaš pristup poljoprivredi.
Thank you very much. Look at the political spectrum. We've criticized everyone else on the political spectrum and said, what you're doing to farming can't continue. Now it's the final straw that will break the camel's back. Now farmers are in the street, but you won't change direction. You have overburdened farmers with too many rules and regulations. There are too many restrictions under your Green Deal. You have cornered farmers with a flood of goods coming in from outside the EU. You've also placed restrictions on them, meaning they can't use synthetic and mineral fertilizers as much. They're not getting the same subsidies for their fuel. And now you think that they're going to be able to buy e-tractors, electric tractors? And then people are cut off from EU funding for LGBT reasons. So are you going to end production in Europe? I hope you are thrown out at the next elections.
La rivoluzione green vuole
Thank you. Well, the Green Revolution wants to change farmers' fields into fields of solar panels so that we can have energy to produce synthetic food. This is the crazy reality of what's happening. Tractors have been outside the European Parliament just for a few days, but you've been laying siege to farmers for years now. You've signed free trade agreements that have opened up the single market to products from third countries that don't have our standards. Some of you accuse us of having voted in favour of the CAP, but it's the only instrument we have to support farmers. If we hadn't voted in favour, they would have been struggling. Left-wing and Green members who didn't vote in favour of it, but it wasn't to support farmers. It was because they didn't think the CAP was green enough. It didn't damage farmers enough. I am proud of the fact that I voted against the crazy provisions linked to the Green Deal, which really bring European production to its knees, not only farming production. You've forgotten European workers, but European workers won't forget you can be sure of that. Thank you. Mr. Pereira, please.
Thank you, President. Farmers are protesting throughout Europe, but there's one thing they've all got in common: the common agricultural policy. You might want rapid change, but this has been a terrible policy. It means aid is unfairly distributed. 70–80% of aid goes to just 7% of farmers. So as long as that continues, there will be injustice. Portuguese farmers have spoken about the lack of support for small farmers and medium-sized farms. This means that they're struggling as costs skyrocket, as their yields and income goes down. And on top of all that, there's a drought. We must show solidarity with farmers, including those who are demonstrating in Villarreal. All of this means we need to urgently alter the CAP. We need to have market management measures. We need to ensure food sovereignty for everyone. Thank you. Mr. Tarabella.
European and Belgian farmers have been expressing their feelings, and I think we have failed actually to listen to them properly. Our policy is governed by hypocrisy. But when I hear what Pascal Canfin is saying, when I hear what Jordan Bardella is saying and the extreme right is doing in voting for the CAP that we have, I can see how far the hypocrisy has gone. You voted for this CAP and it exacerbates the disparities between small farmers and the massive farmers. The reality is that we are partially responsible for the situation in which farmers find themselves in and the way we have funded and promoted large-scale farming. We need to have a policy which is based on a radical rethink of imports, for example, from Latin America. We need mirror clauses governing the dairy and beef imports. And
Dobbiamo fermarci qua, abbiamo
Thank you, Mr. Tarabella. We have to stop catch the eye here. We took 13 speakers out of 24, taking account of the size of political groups. The next debate starts at 11, but we've still got the Commission and Council to take the floor, colleagues, unfortunately. So, Mr. Šefčovič, please.
Micro, please. Please. Je m'entends? Please. Ok, merci. No, lei non può intervenire. Se è un...
No, I'm afraid you can't take the floor, unless it's a point of order or something. But I'm afraid you can't take the floor under Catch the Eye. The Catch the Eye procedure has been concluded. We tried to balance the different political groups. Catch the Eye is now concluded. The floor now goes to Vice President Šefčovič, please.
È un punto all'ordine del giorno, onorevole, non ho capito.
Is this a point of order? I haven't understood.
Señora Presidenta.
President, I would like to criticize the fact that you managed speaking time in a non-transparent manner. There are some of us who have been here right from the start of the debate, and we asked for the floor right at the beginning. We have responsibly listened to the entire debate. We stayed here out of respect for the institution. The speaker's microphone is cut off.
Allora, onorevoli,
Please. As we said right at the start, please, let me explain. As we said right at the start, it wasn't possible to take all requests for the floor because we had 24 of them, so it wasn't possible to take them all. Political groups are of different sizes, and therefore we based ourselves on the size of political groups when we took speakers. So we took 3 PP, 3 Socialists, 1 from Renew, and then 1 from the other groups. That was a decision taken by the presidency because the next debate begins at 11. Please, Vice President Šefčovič, please.
Prego, Vicepresidente.
Vice President, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President, Madam Minister, honourable members of the European Parliament. First and foremost, I would like to thank all of you for having added this key debate at the level of political leaders. And I think that this debate clearly demonstrated that our agriculture and rural communities are affected by a wide range of policies, several crises, and current geopolitical tension. And therefore, I'm glad that I could have participated in this debate on behalf of the European Commission. You, honourable members, clearly highlighted how complex issue we are going to discuss today, especially in these challenging times for Europe and farmers. But I think what is absolutely clear also after this morning exchange is that what we need is to work better together, that we need together look for constructive solutions. And I think, as Madame Garcia Perez mentioned it, early on in our discussion, farmers need EU and EU needs farmers. And I would like to ensure all of you, and especially our farmers and foresters community, that we treat them with the utmost respect and appreciation for their work, and that we will continue to do so also in the future. I think that now clearly it's a time to work on how can we overcome the polarization which got into our discussion, what we can do to build bridges. And I cannot find a better place like this House to start with this process, to build the bridges, to look for the common solutions, and to have a right focus on our discussions for the future. And how to do it in the best possible way is to propose and work on the concrete solutions. And many ideas have been already mentioned here today. And also, as Madam Woodman said yesterday in our debate with the President of the European Commission. What I kind of record and recall that all of you called for making sure that we have to address one crucial point, and this is how to guarantee decent income for our farmers, how to make sure that those who produce in a sustainable manner, who are treating their employees decently, who respect all environmental forms, will not be undercut by unfair practices or cheap alternative imports from abroad, and that's something what we are clearly looking at and what we want to address. Mr. Mureșanu, Mr. Weber and many others have been calling for making sure that we will not take the decisions on agriculture without talking to the farmers. And we are doing exactly that. Therefore, we launched our strategic dialogue on future of agriculture well in advance of the next discussion on the next 7 years budget and next debate on the future CAP. And I believe that through that strategic dialogue and also with your participation, we will have plenty of the ideas how to structure and frame those policies better. And I agree with Mr. Alvarez that we have to work with the farmers because they have to feel the ownership of this process, and this is how the structured strategic dialogue is organized. Madam Miller was referring to the importance to make sure that the strategic dialogue shouldn't just be a top-down approach. And I totally agree with her. And therefore, we made sure the participation in this discussion is wide-ranging, that we have big farmers, small farmers, young farmers, organic farmers, that we have representatives of the whole value chain, researchers, innovators, but also academicians. And I very much appreciate that some of you suggested that it would be good to also discuss these issues on the regional level. And I can assure you that through the special portal which we created for this, we are ready to accommodate also the ideas coming from you, coming from regional dialogue, so they would enrich the final report which we will present to all of you by the end of summer as a result of this strategic dialogue. I also agree with you, honourable members, that the best quality food in the world is produced here in Europe, and that our farmers are guaranteeing not only the food security for all Europeans, but that also created the sector about which we are proud, because it's important part of the European economy. And we want to improve it further, because the European farmers must consolidate this important position for now and for the future. Madam Carvalho was referring to the young farmers. I had several discussions with them, and indeed we have to find a solution to the two prevailing problems they've been highlighting to me: access to land and access to finance. If we want to have young farmers to work on the farms, we have to address these two issues, and it's one of the topics which we are discussing together. Many of you called for better use of our regional policies to make sure that our rural areas have a good schools, have a good internet, have good digital and transport infrastructure, because it's an important part for our farmers to be efficient and for young farmers to be, of course, attracted into this profession. And we take it on board. We are working on it, and also with my colleague, Commissioner responsible for regional development, Madam Ferreira, we are really paying a lot of attention to this issue. I think in every intervention today was a call for reduction of bureaucracy and simplification. And again, we hear you loud and clear, and we have to work again on this together on the European level. I'm glad that many of you also referred that we have to tackle the gold plating on the national level, sometimes the specific regional problems by application of the European law, and just to make sure that we will limit the bureaucracies to the minimum. It's clearly a priority for our Commission. Our President is paying enormous attention to this, and together with the cluster of the Green Deal Commissioners, we are working to make sure that we will also deliver on these very important priorities. I also would like to thank the honourable members who made clear reference for tackling the unfair trade practices and proper implementation of the directive on unfair trade practices. We completely share your objective, and we are working on making sure that this would be well enforced. Currently, we are at a stage where we are assessing how this is enforced and implemented across the member states to make sure that it's uniform, it's working, it delivers, and of course it brings the results which we need to remove unfair trade practices from agriculture. There was also quite a lot of intervention focused on the ongoing negotiations on the trade agreements. And here, again, I would like to be clear, and following this debate, I would like to confirm that Commission assessment is that the conditions for the conclusion of Mercosur agreement are not met. And to conclude, Madam President, and thank you very much for your indulgence, but the debate was very, very long, and I wanted to respond to as many inquiries as possible. I would like to conclude by reassuring you that we in the Commission feel the sense of urgency and we act. The strategic dialogue and intensive interaction with our farmers' community is ongoing. And if you ask about the concrete steps, just look at the last 2 weeks. I would just recall our proposal on the partial derogation of Guy Gate, which is on the living land fallow obligation, where we work with the flexibilities, and I believe that together with the Belgian presidency, we will find a good solution for our farmers. The same applies to the imports, agriculture imports from Ukraine, where we do our utmost to make sure that Ukrainian exports will go to the original destinations in the third countries. And if that would not be possible, that we will protect our farmers where and when necessary. And the last word, Madam President, honourable members, I would recall again, and if you allow me to pass it through our honourable members to our farmers' community. So, dear farmers, we respect you. We value your work, and I believe that we will overcome these challenges which are ahead of us today together. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Grazie. Ora la parola al Consiglio. Prego.
Thank you. Let me now give the floor to the Council, please, Mrs. Labib.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, chers.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner Šefčovič. Members of the Parliament, thank you very much indeed, first and foremost, for this debate, which I've listened to with great interest. I've taken careful note of your comments and your suggestions. There are a few key points which will be central to my policy in the future. Agriculture and environment go hand in hand. The one can't evolve without the other. And the farmers, of course, see at first hand the impact of climate change and are at the same time on the front line in terms of impact. We also have to look at the issues of intensive cultivation and see that this too will have an impact on them. And if we don't have a farming sector, we won't have a planet. Therefore, agriculture, environment and the energy transition have all got to come together, and we need to make sure that we support the farmers and assist them through all the necessary transitions with the support that they need. They are key to us. We need food security. They need a fair market. They need rules which govern the game. They need more Europe, a more flexible, agile Europe, and one which better reflects the daily reality within which they work. As Commissioner Šefčovič has just said, the farmers need the EU, and the EU needs farmers. The free trade agreements have also been central to our debates. Farmers have to be able to export to new markets, to diversify, but once again, not to their detriment. And the Council is keen to see the updated studies on the impact of the trade agreements and the farm sector. Once we get this, we will have better insights into the real impact of trade agreements on our farmers, whether they're large-scale farmers or smaller ones. And I will absolutely undertake to pass on the full detail of our debate to Clara Duval, who will be chairing the next Agriculture and Fisheries Council on the 26th of February. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Minister Labib. That concludes that debate, and our work continues with the This is Europe debate with the President of Romania, Klaus Iohannis. Thank you.
President of Romania, His Excellency Klaus Werner Iohannis.
Dear colleagues, we have the President of Romania, Klaus Iohannis, with us. today. Dear President, dear Klaus, welcome to the European Parliament. Thank you for accepting our invitation to address this House as part of our This is Europe series of debates. 17 years of European Union membership have been transformative for Romania and for Europe. It has given new impetus for businesses, for industry, for science and academia. It has brought reforms and social benefits. It has brought opportunities for people and leveled up communities. EU membership has meant protection for people's rights, for social justice and the rule of law. And in times of geopolitical change, these European values must be defended. Dear President, I would like to particularly thank you for your country's unwavering support for Ukraine and for the Republic of Moldova, particularly now that EU accession negotiations have begun. Thank you to Romania for always being the champion the people of those nations needed. Romania has a special place in my heart. It is a country that has embraced what it means to be European. At the height of the pandemic, Romanian doctors flew to hospitals in other member states to help. When we faced devastating natural disasters, Romanian firefighters left their country to run into the flames. In the first days of the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine, Romanian families rushed to the border to comfort those fleeing. So mulțumesc pentru tot, Romania. Mr. President, yours is a country that has shown how to overcome challenges and how to lead. Europe is stronger thanks to Romania, thanks to your reinforcement of the EU's eastern flank. And we will be stronger still when you finally take your rightful place in the Schengen area and join the Eurozone in the future. And you will find this House on your side on that journey. Last word, on the 9th of June, over 19 million Romanians will be called upon to choose the 33 members of the European Parliament elected to represent them. We must work together to make sure people understand why they must vote, why it is important. Their voice matters for the European Union and Romania's future. And we must keep listening and keep delivering. Dear President, dear Klaus, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Doamnă președinte,
Madam President of the European Parliament, distinguished members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to be here today before you. Thank you, President Metsola, for giving me the opportunity to come back to the heart of European democracy at the beginning of a crucial year for the future of the European Union. Like 5 years ago, when I spoke before the European Parliament, I'd like to reassert the confidence that me and the Romanian people have in the value of the joint and solidary European action, in the undeniable power of one Europe. The effects of the pandemic, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East, these are but a few of the dramatic developments which, in recent years, have put to the test not just our response capabilities, but also our sincere attachment to the Union and to the values and the principles that hold us together. Ladies and gentlemen, my country is probably one of the best examples of EU's power to bring about change. Accession has brought us undeniable and most concrete benefits. The European funds received by Romania since the moment of accession have allowed us to carry out essential infrastructure projects. More than 600,000 young Romanian young men and women have participated in the Erasmus program, thus embracing the European way of life. The Union is a space of safety, protection, prosperity and diversity. Par excellence, the European Union is an area of free movement. The elimination in March of air and maritime border checks must be naturally and quickly followed by the elimination of land border checks. Only in this manner will we be able to have an accurate and concrete reflection of the contribution that Romania brings to strengthening the security of the entire European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, the European project needs everyday attention, effort, patience and honesty if we want to live free in a united and prosperous Europe. Today, Romania is a strong promoter of coordinated joint action in the spirit of European values. It is our responsibility to support a Europe that takes forward these principles and values, also in regard to our friends in the European neighborhood who have chosen our model of democracy, our model of development. And the key moment of this process is represented by the very European elections. The priorities that we shall define together in the aftermath of these elections will come to help us to provide a pragmatic response to the challenges of the present and better prepare us for the challenges of the future.
Our Union faces unprecedented geostrategic challenges. Our future and the future of the next generations depend on each and every decision we are taking now. On a global level, the rules-based international order is being challenged over and over again. Russia pursues its aggression against Ukraine. Around the Union, instability and insecurity have reached alarming levels. The open conflict in the Middle East, the situation in the Red Sea, and the worrying developments in the Sahel, all these have a systemic impact on our own security. Climate change, economic difficulties, and illegal migration continue to generate their own negative impact, adding to the complexity of global dynamics. On top of all these challenges, we witness a crisis of values, and as far as I see it, a crisis of public trust in our institutions. We are indeed facing an erosion of values within the European Union, which fuels the perception of decline of Europe, or at least of Europe's leadership and global role. This is why we need to do more to promote the feeling and the certainty that we are all part of the same community of values, which must be protected by every single one of us. Honourable members of the European Parliament, at such a pivotal moment, fundamental questions lie ahead of us. We must answer them together as Europeans with vision, courage, and responsibility. First, What can we do and have to do as a union? The current challenges are pushing us towards a transformative rethinking of our actions. The past few years proved that our common action as one, as a true union, is key. Our unity has been repeatedly tested and has not faltered. More than this, it was a strategic surprise for some and brought us tactical advantages. We should build upon this. Second, thinking further, another crucial question emerges. What can we do more internally? Strengthening our internal resilience is a fundamental condition for a stronger union and for its increased geopolitical role. It is perhaps the most complex discussion. It includes finding the best strategies to respond to hybrid threats and to increase the functionality of our democratic systems. It means developing sectoral policies such as technology, including artificial intelligence, fighting climate change, stimulating competitiveness through industrial production, and sustainable supply chains. I do believe that the success of the demarches in these areas depends on a strong single market, which can provide solutions to many of the problems we face, encouraging creativity and large-scale development. We, as a union, are now taking unprecedented steps to move away from a reactive approach in consolidating our internal resilience. We are taking action in terms of strengthening our internal capabilities, such as infrastructure, green and digital transitions, civil crisis response, energy efficiency, and supply chains. Another obvious line of action is to continue to support Ukraine. We must stand by Ukraine and its people. I have this conviction, despite certain voices invoking a European solidarity fatigue. Defending democracy, territorial integrity and sovereignty, as well as the rules-based international order, cannot be subject to any fatigue. Romania remains engaged in this common effort. We are strongly involved in supporting Ukraine, as well as the Republic of Moldova, which is intensely affected by the crisis in the region. We also need to keep our focus on security. We are now moving towards a joint, long-term planning and increased convergence in the field of European security and defense, while working in full complementarity with NATO. It is indeed high time to deliver on our European ambitions when it comes to our defense industry. Esteemed members of the European Parliament, I wish to express my appreciation for the strong attachment to values that this House has always shown. But we must be aware about the growing Euroscepticism. Its adepts may raise issues that are in some part real, but they give wrong and dangerous solutions that would throw our societies into crisis. It is therefore our common duty to be honest in our communication with the European citizens. Third, how can the Union further externalize its attractiveness. This is another key question to address when looking towards our future. How can we stay attractive as a union? The answer is clear. Enlarging our European family by accepting new members will only strengthen the Union. The historic decisions taken by the European Council last December on the Republic of Moldova and Ukraine, as well as on Bosnia and Herzegovina and on Georgia, are a victory for the entire European Union. This Parliament has been strongly supportive of this objective, and I thank you for this. Romania, and I personally, have strongly supported and promoted it. I think that it confirms the Union's attractiveness at the time of hardship, strengthens its geopolitical weight, and creates opportunities for member states and candidate countries alike. Enlargement is an essential part of our strategic answer to the geopolitical developments and a key investment in lasting peace, stability, and democracy in our neighborhood. At the same time, the European Union must assume a leading global role in preserving the international order as a precondition for preserving our way of life and our values. The European Union's economic weight must be mirrored by its international political role. The challenges we are facing are global, and some of them can only be solved by promoting relationships with partners with similar values and interests. Ensuring this strategic network of resilient partnerships will make us stronger and more competitive in the long run. This is why we need to intensify our global outreach towards Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. And we do need to further consolidate the transatlantic link. This is crucial for our success. Two last questions. Do we have the means to achieve our goals? And which is the way forward? And what is the future of the Union? The Union has the legal and institutional instruments to achieve its goals, and the response to the pandemic and the crisis that followed is illustrative. But it is equally obvious that we need to streamline our decision-making capacity. We need to closely analyze what measures can be taken in a context where some consider that the real efficiency of decision-making mechanisms is impossible without reopening the treaties, while others radically rule out this possibility. There is no doubt that measures such as those discussed in relation to the qualified majority voting in specific areas of foreign and security policy can be taken without reopening the treaties. Without excluding changes to the treaties at some point, we need to use all available possibilities under the existing treaties for smoother and quicker decision-making. Romania is fully engaged in this exercise. Honourable members of the European Parliament, despite the views of some, we are stronger now than 5 years ago. We showed remarkable unity in probably the direst circumstances we had to face as a union. Nevertheless, we have a lot of work ahead of us. Our European common construction is, after all, work in progress. As stated by Jacques Delors, the visionary European leader whom we recently paid homage to, I cite, "The European model is in danger if we obliterate the principle of personal responsibility." I close the quote. Therefore, dear colleagues, it is our shared responsibility to do the best for all our citizens. We have a special responsibility towards our youth. The future generations are looking towards us with hope and optimism in times of geopolitical volatility and socio-economic distress. The future of Europe is about the capacity of the Union to give them honest answers and to deliver in education, health, prosperity, climate security, and employment opportunities. Five years ago, we adopted the Sibiu Declaration. The 10 commitments made back then are still valid. Unity, solidarity, cohesion, the rule of law, they continue to lie at the very core of our joint European action. For my part, I remain deeply faithful to these values and principles in my future endeavors. And I'm convinced that these are the basis for the work done by you here in the European Parliament as well. I also believe that together we are able to maintain the Union on the path of success, staying true to our vision of a united and stronger Europe. Thank you.
Much, President. As you can see, the colleagues have very much appreciated your speaking points and your speech. I start now by giving the floor to President of the EPP Group, Manfred Weber.
Madam President, Commissioner, Mr. President, good to have you in the European Parliament. Welcome. And I want to start with a quote. "We cannot ignore the challenges we face on the eastern flank. Security and defense are fundamental components of Union's future." These, Mr. President, are words from you. In the Munich Security Conference in 2019, I was in the audience, and you were right then, and you are right now. The war in Ukraine has been a wake-up call for many, but not for you. When you entered in office in 2014, you said the defense was one of the priorities for Romania and for Europe. In 2017, you managed to get the Romanian parliament to increase defense spending to meet the NATO 2% commitment. And in 2023, Romania committed to spend for defense 2.5% of its GDP. It's your determination that made Romania a strong pillar of European defense and one of Ukraine's greatest allies. This is leadership at its best. not speaking about problems, but solving them. And, dear President, when we look at Romania today, we see a true European success story. Since joining the European Union in 2007, Romania has become Eastern Europe's second largest economy in an impressive speed. A modern, attractive country. Bucharest is #1 in the Balkans for building up startups. Cluj is a true European tech hub, a country full of talents that is fighting to turn brain drain in brain gain. Dear Mr. President, great leaders are not only great at national level, but they are also great on European level. And you also remembered us that in the Sibiu summit in 2019, the first EU summit to be held on a Europe's Day, you got all leaders to agree on a Europe that protects its citizens. You have advanced many EU defense initiatives, always working for a strong EU pillar in a strong NATO. You started many strategic discussions on enlargement, and it was also your strong voice in the European Council that made it possible to opening the accession talks with Ukraine and Moldova last December. Europe owes a lot to Romanian leadership, and Romania owes a lot to your leadership. You showed to Romanian citizens that a modern, a pro-European Romania is possible and is successful. And I want to also thank the Romanian Commissioner, Adina Vălean, and all Romanian colleagues in the plenary who served also to this broader perspective. And, dear President, for us as EPP, there is also no doubt that it's now also time that Romania must fully join the Schengen area. You have been ready for 13 years on this subject. If planes, dear friends, and ships are crossing borders without inspection, why should cars and trucks have to wait in endless lines? Romania and Bulgaria must be in Schengen. It's good for the security, it's good for the business, and it's good for our citizens. In the middle of the Brexit crisis in 2019, the spirit of Sibiu was fresh air to relaunch Europe. Now, 5 years later, if I may say this from an EPP point of view, the EPP family will go to Bucharest for the Congress, will go to Romania to kick off our campaign and to kick off the campaign for the European elections. And once again, Romania is the place to shape a safer home for all Europeans. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Now, on behalf of the S&D Group, Juan Fernando López Aguilar.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President Metsola. President Johannes, having listened to what you've said, I'd just like to share two very positive messages that you gave to us. First of all, I'm quite sure that you know just how many of us in the European Parliament very much celebrate that for the first time under the Spanish presidency at the end of December, we've been able to lift the restrictions for your full enjoyment of the Schengen area. For Romania and Bulgaria, or for both air borders and maritime borders. This was a historic resolution. We know that the whole process started in 2011 when the Commission decided that both Romania and Bulgaria had overcome the various requirements. So we're very happy that you are now able to enjoy the Schengen area. We know that when it comes to European solidarity, especially in the area of displaced persons as a result of Russian aggression in Ukraine. We know that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of vulnerable women and children that have come into Europe across the border with Romania. 200,000 are still in Romania, being able to enjoy these temporary protection orders. They're able to live freely and work, be educated, and obviously the right to education and to health cover. So I'd like to express my recognition to the solidarity, this very positive solidarity. And then only yesterday, the European Parliament validated 1.5 billion euro for the Solidarity Fund, for the 1.5 billion euro to support immigration, which obviously is a strengthening and the enhancing of the rights of those people who have entered the European Union looking for protection. Thank you.
La prochaine, c'est la présidente du...
The next speaker is the president of the Renew Group, Valerie Ayer. Thank you, President. Mr. President, Commissioner, dear colleagues. Romania is starting an electoral cycle. The presidential, local, as well as the EP elections. These are going to be crucial elections, and it is a strong signal for the building of the future of Romania in Europe and domestically in just a few months. We know that Romania is fully rooted in the EU in fighting corruption. We have had a resolute commitment to the European Public Prosecutor's Office, and that has been enormous in what has taken place in Bucharest. These values are the very basis of our European community. Our family, Renew, will fight to the end for these projects to make sure that they are brought to fruition. Now, we have an era in interference in our territories, and we're going to have to be robust in our response. Cyber protection, fighting disinformation are huge challenges. We know that the hard right is trying to sow hate in Romania and elsewhere. Therefore, we will have a big challenge to protect democracy and our institutions, Mr. President. Now, we have a community of destiny, and I am so pleased, therefore, to see the lifting of the air and sea borders and in Romania and Bulgaria next month. And before this chamber, I would like to state that our political group will continue to defend to the lifting the land border checks as well. That is a priority for us. So our community of destiny is a strong commitment also to the people in Ukraine. Their struggle is ours, and what they are doing is our fight too. And Romania has been supporting Ukraine full on. The security of our continent is under threat, and it is together that we must act. I should like also to turn to Moldova for a second. I am so pleased that we have seen that the country is strengthening its path toward our union. Mr. President, this is a huge year, not just for Romania, but for all of Europe in this election cycle. Our institutions are at stake. It is our responsibility of all to protect them.
On behalf of the Green Group, Nicolae Ștefănuță.
Domnule președinte, doamnă
President, Minister, Commissioner, Madam President. We speak today about the future of Europe and the future of Romania, and we all wish for peace, freedom, equality. But today's reality is different. So many Romanians continue to leave the country. We need new hospitals. Our population is poor. Millions of young people don't know what to expect from the future. In order for populism and extremism not to grow, as you have said, democracy must go hand in hand with wealth. Romanians and Bulgarians are still queuing at the borders. They want to become part of the Schengen area in a dignified manner this year. President, I want to thank you for your engagement towards Ukraine and for your Euro-Atlantic position. This is the right way. But your mandate and also our mandates are coming to an end. So let us ask, what kind of Romania do we leave behind? What Europe do we leave to our young people? What did we want to do in Sibiu? This is also my city. Let's put the future of young people in the center of our politics. They need to be listened to. They need to be heard. They need help. I want us to fight for a Romania which gives young people accessible, affordable housing, good jobs, good services. We need housing for students. Our future doctors, professors, architects, they live in poor housing conditions while they are studying. The future president of Romania, maybe is in one such student dorm today. How do we treat them? What do we offer to them? Let us also take care of our environment. I know you care for the environment. I also care a lot, such as the whole family of Greens. We need a greener Romania with clean cities, with fast trains, with healthy food, with more respect for nature, for the soil, for bees, for animals. I would like to leave to my young daughter, who is 4 today, such a country and such a continent. And young people, and this is very important, do not want to live in a country in which the extreme right is governing. This is why I ask you, President, do not allow Romania to have a fascist government. We do not need a new referendum of hate. Europe loves the human rights and the human right to love whoever you wish to. And Romania must ensure that it will not allow the agents of Russia to create policy for Romanians. Emil Cioran said, "The past of Romania is not flattering. I am not proud of the fact that my ancestors have slept for so long waiting for freedom. Today we are free. We do not wait for freedom, but we will not give in to extremists. We have what we need. We have resources. We have our heart. Our heart beats for Romania and for Europe." Thank you.
On behalf of the ECR Group, to Christian Terhes.
Madam President, Madam Commissioner, Mr. President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this is Europe Debates held in the European Parliament are a great opportunity for European political leaders to express their vision about the current and future course of Europe. I congratulate, therefore, the Romanian President, Klaus Iohannis, for sharing his vision about Europe and emphasizing the importance of Romania for the European project. But since the debate is about Europe, before we talk about what Europe is, it is imperative to look back and see what Europe was, how this project started, where it is heading, and if this new direction has anything in common with the initial project. When Madam von der Leyen held her speech in this plenary in 2019, she said that the European project is based, and I quote, on the Romanian law, on the Roman law, and the Greek philosophy, end quote. She forgot one, and the most important pillar of the European project, the Judeo-Christian values, civilization, and culture. It was the Christian belief and the Judeo-Christian values based on the Bible that gave the power and the motivation to many political leaders from different European nations, which killed, destroyed, and decimated each other during the Second World War, to meet after the war, pray together, forgive and reconcile with each other, and come up with an economical and political plan that would and brought peace through prosperity. Because of these visionary, faithful, and courageous political leaders, the Western Europe was able to achieve peace and hold it for over 80 years, which was unprecedented for Europe. I say Western Europe because us in the Eastern Europe, we were under the Soviet occupation and we experienced a different kind of political and economical system, an atheistic one, which the state and where the state and the Communist Party was God, where the state was above all and people were deprived of their basic fundamental rights. The difference between the two political and economical systems that Europe experienced after the Second World War, the European project that we witness here, which evolved in the European Community and Union in Western Europe, and the USSR and the Soviet Marxist and Communist model in Eastern Europe, it's exactly the pillar that was, intentionally or not, forgotten by Madam Ursula von der Leyen, the Judeo-Christian values, culture, and civilization. The Judeo-Christian values are the source of and notions that later evolved and were mentioned in international treated national constitutions and laws like human dignity, equality before the law, separation of powers in the state, or inalienable fundamental human rights. Robert Schuman, a founding father of the European project and former president of the European Parliament, said, and I quote, "Democracy owes its existence to Christianity. Christianity teaches equality of all nature, of all men, children of the same God, redeemed by the same Christ, without discrimination of race, color, class, or profession. Democracy will be Christian or it won't exist. An unchristian democracy is a caricature which sinks into tyranny or anarchy." It was exactly these Judeo-Christian values that brought peace, prosperity, respect among nations in Western Europe, and the lack of them that brought tyranny, abuse and poverty in the USSR in Eastern Europe. It was this faith in God that my fellow Romanians held strong under communism and motivated them to dream and fight for freedom. It is therefore incomprehensible for many fellow Romanians why in the past 4 years exactly these personal and national freedoms are violated by the European Commission under Ursula von der Leyen. The European project was built on a free market principle which has brought prosperity in Western Europe. In the past 4 years under the current European Commission, we see that free market principles are becoming an over-regulated one, which is making the European businesses and products less likely to be competitive on the global market. The European project was built on the concept that fundamental human rights are inalienable and the governments must not force or impose medical products into citizens' bodies, but allow them to decide based on their free and informed consent. We saw what happened during the pandemic when people were forced to be vaccinated with medical products that we find out now later on have many adverse effects. Europe has long been a reference of democracy and human rights, championing principles of liberty, equality and rule of law. Any erosion of these fundamental rights, even by EU entities, represents a betrayal of our shared values and must be met with firm opposition. The Romanian nation, which I most proudly represent, was able to overcome any challenges during history and become today one of the fastest growing economies in Europe. We did it through faith and fight for freedom. Thank you.
Next, ID Group, Gunnar Beck. 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, Your Excellency. Romania's motor insurance industry has been in turmoil in recent years. 12 companies providing motor insurance have been driven out of business in just 12 years. 12 insurance fails in 12 years should raise serious concerns about the regulatory environment in a member state. In 2019, the Romanian insurance regulator, ASF, asked Eurowins Romania to buy the then failing city insurance. Just 3 years later, ASF suspended Eurowins' insurance license in Romania, apparently for questionable reasons. This was Romania's last motor insurer, gone. Last year, the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development raised questions with the Romanian finance minister about the actions of ASF and submitted a resolution proposal to your predecessor to no effect. The European insurance watchdog EIOPA wrote a report about the Eurowins affair. In a reply to my written question, the European Commission claims it never saw the report. To date, I'm denied access to the full details of the EIOPA report. What are ASF and EIOPA trying to hide from the European Commission and members of the European Parliament? One observation: following the decision to strip Eurowins of its license, ASF awarded a license to Aizi Asigurare, a subsidiary of Superbet. And who's the chairman of Superbet? One of Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's brothers. Your Excellency, Romania is one of the largest net recipients of EU money. You're receiving 10 billion euros from the European budget and the Next Generation EU Fund. According to the Corruption Perception Index of Transparency International, you're the second most corrupt country in the European Union. Now, none of this is ideal for a country hoping to attract foreign investors. What I'm asking, are you proposing to do about it? Thank you.
I give the floor now to Claire Daly on behalf of the Left Group.
Thank you, President. And President, I listened very carefully to your opening remarks, and for me, I think Romania is one of the most interesting European countries. I think the Romanian people are pretty much like the Irish people in my experience in terms of their approach to life. And I spent a month in Timișoara and Bucharest in the spring of 1990 as a student leader from Ireland and learned so much about the hopes and aspirations of Romanian citizens in the post-Ceausescu years. And I think against that backdrop, for me, it's quite unfortunate to see that since joining the EU, so many Romanian people have been forced to leave the country or been hoovered up by Western Europe as a sort of pool of cheap labour rather than having the opportunities that they should have had at home. I'm sorry to see that you ended up joining NATO and that you're spending so much of your defence money on things that really should be spent on making people's lives better. And I am sorry to see cases such as the one highlighted by my colleague about the very, very serious problems and questions that remain to be answered regarding the operation of the Romanian regulator, the ASF, because of the consequential impact not just on your own drivers but also across the EU motor insurance sector. And I too am one of the members of this House who for many months now have been raising questions about that regulator's decision to withdraw the licence to Euroins Romania, which is obviously part of the largest independent insurance group in Central Eastern and South Eastern Europe. Now, I know you know about that case, Mr. President, and not just because my colleague raised it, but it is beyond curious that the Romanian regulator acted against this company 3 years after requesting them to take over city insurance. Why did they do this? It is a fact that both the Bulgarian financial regulator and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development queried what your regulator was up to. Both of them approached the European authorities. One of the organisations produced a report cautioning against the consequences of this. They even produced a resolution proposal which would have mitigated the impacts, but nothing happened. And your country faces exposure to a €500 million lawsuit, not to mention the broader impact beyond. So I suppose, having brought this to the attention of the European Insurance and Occupation Pensions Authority, who are supposed to mitigate these issues, but who have failed to produce the report for members of this Parliament. It's being withheld from us. I'm deeply concerned about the security around this case. So I suppose my question, Mr. President, is really quite a simple one. In the interests of the citizens of Romania and beyond, would you join us in supporting our call to the European Commission to initiate a comprehensive and independent review of this case?
I give the floor now to Ioan Rareș Bogdan, 1.5 minutes.
Dear Roberta, domnule președinte, excelențe.
Mr. President, Madam President, Your Excellencies, I have had the privilege to listen to the analysis and the vision of a real statesman. Klaus Iohannis, the President of Romania of the last 9 years, voted twice in office by over 7 million Romanians. This man has a vocation for the European construction. It's not just a speech. This is Romania, dear colleagues, the most important country to secure, to give us security on the Black Sea. We have a huge border with Ukraine. Over 7 million Ukrainians have taken shelter in Romania, fleeing war over the past 2 years. And Romanians never closed their borders, were never hostile towards those who were trying to save their lives and the lives of their children. On the contrary, on an institutional level, led by President Iohannis, and on a personal level, each and every person opened their hearts and opened their homes to refugees. We are not the richest in Europe. We're not the ones that receive the most help, but we are the most hospitable, perhaps. And this is Romania. This is Romania, an honest country. We are under attack by this Russian dictatorship who hates democracy. We are under cyber attack, and he's trying to corrupt voters and to destabilize Romania and its European path. He's trying to destroy our values, but Romanians will stay European. President Iohannis will fight until the last day of his term in office to make sure that things remain the way they are. We have a huge energy potential, and the investment in this country will make Europe's energy efficiency hang in the balance. And we are a rational state, profoundly pro-European. And I would like other countries to follow our lead. We have a president that managed to promote his country's interests without jeopardizing the interest of the region. And in Romania, there's a song that was sung first 150 years ago, and in this song, Hora Unit, it says, if one person is alone, we are alone, but if we have two people, then we're united. And in this hard times, this could be our motto. This could be the anthem of Europe right now, Hora Uniri.
Maria Grappini next. 1 minute. 1 minute, 1 minute. It will start.
Doamna președintă, dragă...
President, dear Roberta, President, Minister, first of all, I want to thank you for describing my country in such a beautiful manner, and it is true. And dear colleagues, the ones who tried to defamate Romania, I want you to try to understand it, to visit it and talk to Romanians, and then you will understand. I want to be objective. I want to speak about the issues that we have raised in front of all heads of state. I want to ask you, do you really like the way Europe looks? What Europe looks like right now? Do you think we could have done more? Do we really have social cohesion? I am in the IMCO committee, and I refuse to say single market, which you have said, just as Commissioner Breton, because I believe we do not have a single market yet, and this is what we must fight for. I am finishing my second mandate, and I am quite disappointed because we do not have a single market, and Romania is not in the Schengen area. And then, do you think it is fair that the CAP, is the CAP fair? Why do we not have fairness for such a long time? We have so many farmers in Europe who are protesting. Why are they not rewarded in the same manner throughout Europe? I think these are problems that could have been solved in these years. And even as we finish our mandates, we must continue our efforts, because we know in the Council is where decisions are taken. I thank you and I congratulate you.
2 minutes.
Dear President, domnule președinte,
Mr. President, the election year 2024 is crucial for Europe because the values on which it was built and have worked so far are under siege from extremism, anti-European feelings and disinformation. This is why, in order to keep democracy alive, this year's debates need to be relevant for citizens' daily lives and not so much so for the survival of political parties or some political leaders. For Romania, the challenge is even greater. We have all of our elections happening this year. This can lead to a complete reset of the political establishment in Romania. And although we have made slow steps on the European path, Romania is now an eastern pillar of the Europe, and thanks to our society. And Mr. President, you are the last political actor to step out after the elections this year without anything at stake until then. You have a duty to communicate to our citizens how important it is for us to belong to the European family. This is a complicated year with a lot of populist challenges, and I think you can do this in a credible way and clear way. Romania and the European Union cannot slip into extremism without solutions. And all this election pressure makes us wonder what kind of leader our citizens, our Romanian citizens and European citizens expect today, because after many disappointments, Romanians feel that the leaders are disconnected from them. They don't talk to them in simple, clear ways, even when they do talk to them. And the effort to build bridges again in our crisis-hit society is going to be huge. But what is at stake here for us and for the Union is also huge. The farmers, youth without a future, citizens that have been forgotten in small towns need to find their motivation again and to be committed with a vision for the future where Brussels and Strasbourg are on their side and not their enemies in their imagination.
Grunenberg, 1 minute.
This is Europe. Das ist Europa.
This is Europe. Yes, yes. Well, we have no choice other than to work together for climate stability and biodiversity, dear colleagues. And we need Romania and its treasury or veritable treasure chest of primeval forests. So thank you very much, President, for protecting these forests. I myself have been to the Făgaș Mountains and other beautiful places in Romania, and I've seen the beauty of your unique forests, and there are so many endemic species of flora and fauna that I've seen, but I've also seen progressive cutting down of forests, the clearing of woods and forests in Natura 2000 areas, and degradation of soil and erosion of soil because there are no roots holding it together. We know that a procedure has been initiated against Romania. There were promises of mitigating measures, but this issue of tree felling is not on the agenda. So, President Iohannis, how are you making progress when it comes to reform of the forestry sector, putting an end to clear felling, training young people to work in the forest? We need your help.
Anna Bonfrisco, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Signora Commissaria.
Madam Commissioner. President Iohannis, sir. In March, you will guide Romania into Schengen. It's a historic moment, and it will make your country and the European Union stronger. And I would like to state that Italy and Romania will also be strengthening their historic, economic, social, economic, and cultural links that are based on the Judeo-Christian values. There are more than 1 million Romanians living in Italy, and 19,000 Italian companies exist in Romania. We are growing together. We are also linked via NATO, Sea Guardian, in the defense of the Mediterranean. And in Schengen, it gives strength to our union in political and judicial cooperation in fighting criminal organizations, giving security to the EU and our allies, as Romania very generously welcomed Ukrainian refugees. I'd also like to welcome this possibility to speak to you, sir, to draw attention to perhaps a minor issue, but linked to the illegal trafficking of animals and mistreatment, one of the major funding sources for international criminal organizations. We must fight together within our history and our friendship that we have seen, and to have the most authentic demonstration of Europe via fighting this. Thank you.
President, Mr. President, Madam Commissioner, Herta Müller once wrote, "In this country, we had to walk, eat, sleep, and love in fear." When we read about life in communist times, we can only appreciate Romanian success in the European project. Actually, Romanian culture and heritage is indispensable for Europe, because it merges the Roman Latin culture with the Orthodox heritage and with Germanic, Slavian, and Magyar influence. And that gives Romanians a unique ability to understand European diversity. We have seen Romania's amazing economic development under your presidency and impressive progress in the rule of law. Today, when we see attacks on the rule of law in Spain, in Malta, in Slovakia, we have to congratulate you, Mr. President, for your exemplary leadership. And we have an historic step in the lifting of air and sea border controls. But that is not enough. Romania, like Bulgaria, must fully join Schengen. You dealt with the migration crisis, pandemic restrictions, and the arrival of war refugees in an extraordinary manner under immense pressure. The EPP has always been on your side in this matter. As the great Romanian poet Mihai Eminescu once wrote, "Vreme trece, vreme vine." Time goes by, time comes along. The time for complete and full accession to Schengen has come. Vreme trece, vreme vine.
Thank you, Mr. Rangel. Next, Vice President Angel, 1 minute.
Sehr geehrter Herr
President Iohannis, it's an honour, great honour to have you here in the House of European Democracy here. And of course we welcome the Romanian citizens soon in the Schengen area so that they can cross borders on sea and land without any controls. We're very disappointed in the Socialists and Democrats that these land borders are maybe disappearing, but there are still problems with the environment. There's a lot of destruction of the environment and also a lot of goods that are meant to be going to and from Ukraine have remained blocked. And so we insist that the borders be opened up. We insist that Council does something about this because Romania deserves this roundly. We want to continue to strengthen our European project by doing this. President, we're facing huge challenges. The digitization of our societies, for example, and briefly, recently I had an opportunity to attend an event organized by Mr. Negrescu, our colleague, on digital competence in the rural areas. And at this conference I heard about a lot of very interesting experiences and projects in Romania. I'd like to see how you see the challenge of digital transformation in Europe and what sort of ideas you can give us to succeed. Should we continue to regulate or should we leave this up to the techno giants and algorithms?
Use Botosh, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President Metsola, dear Madam Commissioner, stimată doamnă ministru, stimate domnule.
Madam Minister, Mr. President, I am honored that the President of Romania is giving a speech before the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Romania, neighbors, Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova, where Russia keeps trying to exert its influence. We are a Black Sea country where the war is affecting all the countries in the area. This is why it's paramount that Romania stay a democracy built on European values. This is Europe. This is a topic at hand. And Romania is part of the EU, has been part of the EU for 17 years. And we see how Romania is developing, is becoming more modern. And the 90 billion euros from European funding have helped this tremendously. But also the fact that Romanian citizens have access to the European culture and life, even though we're not still fully fledged members of Schengen. And we need to step on it here. And I'm very glad that you have said it in no uncertain terms here in the plenary. Romania has shown that it has the European values in its DNA and that it's promoting these values even when Romanian politicians have made wrong decisions. The citizens have been staunch protectors of democracy and the rule of law and European values. Romania is the rule of law, and this is very important for the lives of each and every citizen. We all have a set of rules, and no one, no matter how high the position, is above these rules. And speaking of rules, rules are the rules even in an election year. And the trust that EU citizens have in the EU institutions will grow if we manage to talk to our citizens in an open way and explain to them step by step not only what they can do for Europe, but what Europe is doing for them on a daily basis. And we won't be able to do this if the debate in Europe, in Romania, is going to be skewed.
1 minute.
Thank you, President, and thank you, President Johannes, for sharing your perspectives on our common European future. Very often this House is used for national debates, even from prime ministers and presidents, so I'm very thankful that you shared your vision for what Europe should look like. So let me ask you quite concretely, when do you think can we have an improved decision-making in the Council? When will we move to qualified majority? When can we actually change the treaties? I would love to hear an answer on that. And then second, we have a great moment of European democracy coming up with the European elections. But looking at the different countries and also at Romania, I do see inhibiting factors to democracy, such as the amount of signatures you need to collect to be able to run as a party, such as the fact that you can, I think, only be, or you have to be 23 to be able to be a candidate. These are all things that could potentially slow down our democratic participation. So maybe a last question on this. Will you advance the European Electoral Law Act that we proposed here in 2020 with a second vote for transnational lists to strengthen our European democracy? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Borselager. Next, Sven Simon, 1 minute.
Frau Präsidentin.
Madam President, President Johannes, you are a president who, in his own country, has always pushed for reforms. You stand by the rule of law. Your fight against corruption is exemplary, and it is a great deal up to you that Romania will be part of the Schengen Agreement. This strength of reforms, ladies and gentlemen, is something that we now need at European level. The European Union was founded to protect Europeans from each other, and now we need to further develop it to protect Europeans against the rest of the world. The European Parliament has pushed for proposals for reform to make the European Union more able to act in the future. The Council is having difficulties coming up with an answer to reach a decision on a convention. You, President, mentioned that there's a lot that we could change without changing the treaties. But if we really want to overcome the internal opposition and improve our action outside the European Union, we need a European Convention, and I'd call for your support for the convention of that convention.
Giorgio Hadoru, 1 minute.
Mulțumesc.
Thank you. In order to tackle global challenges, we must first tackle our own challenges at home. We are faced with global crises and challenges, but we seem to have forgotten the people who are next to us. We have lost the contact with those who we represent here. The dissatisfaction of Romanians is growing, and it is related to daily life. We see the protests of farmers and people in the transport sector, but the truth is that we are all affected by the crisis. President, we could have done more for Romanians. Honourable Commission, Honourable Council, you have often ignored the problems of my people. And I have seen too many colleagues who were not able to say no when our interests were thrashed. I am going to repeat what I have always said. I believe we must reconnect to the problems of ordinary people in our own countries, in our own cities. I think this is the only manner that we will be able to increase their confidence that what we do here is for their own good. This is the only way that Iași and Romania will be in good hands, just like the whole of Europe.
Thank you, President. Ioana Potkivánok. Domnule președinte, fiecare cetățean român înțelege această...
Every European citizen understands what I've just said in Hungarian, not because the majority is now learning the language of the minority, but in 2020 you use the Hungarian language as a political weapon against your opponents. Ever since you've come to office, you haven't answered the plea of the Hungarian minority to have an agreement, to reach an agreement with the minority. And other countries are doing it, but there are issues that are taboo in Bucharest. And the extreme right is gaining ground in Romania. Xenophobia and anti-democratic feelings and anti-European feelings are gaining ground, and they come from the same parents, and there's lots to be done in Romania still, and in the EU for Romania. We are on a path of full integration in the EU. This is why we need to become full members of the Schengen area, because this is the right that we have earned.
Minutes.
Presidente Iohannis, la Romania.
President Iohannis, Romania is an important European country. It acceded to the EU in 2007 and in March will enter Schengen. This is excellent news because it means that we have a more united and stronger Europe in which citizens can have the same rights. Europe has many challenges to face together. Here in this European Parliament, in the course of recent months, we had the first law on AI, the first one in the world. That is not enough. When we look at migration, for example, Europe needs to speak with one voice, no nationalistic vetoes. We must be structural in our approach and not in an emergency approach for those who arrive from the Mediterranean and the Balkans. Digital revolution, climate action, new changes to work, fighting inequality. These are the priorities of our platform. The elections are just around the corner, and they are going to be crucial for this continent. Millions of young Europeans are asking for a better future. We must be able to make sure that happens by making the best possible choices. Thank you.
Sean, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. President Iohannis, welcome back to the European Parliament. We very well remember here your speech from 2018 when you stood up for European values and told us that unity and solidarity are the solutions for Europe. Time has proven you right. We have seen that Europe stays united, it provides solutions and helps people in need. We have seen you defending European values, and we have seen you defending a European approach to challenges that we are facing. Romania has chosen the pro-European path, and we have seen a European decade in Romania under your leadership, and for this we say thank you today. We are seeing today that Romania believes in Europe, and we are also seeing that Europe believes in Romania. Together we have managed over recent years to create the biggest package of economic support after the pandemic. You always advocated for strong support for Ukraine. You led the efforts of supporting the Republic of Moldova, and you helped Europe understand that we are only safe if our neighboring countries are safe. Looking ahead, our common task is to defend Europe. Europe means security, Europe means prosperity, democracy, rule of law, and Europe means stability. As pro-Europeans, we shall continue to provide solutions and tell people that extremism is no solution to any of the difficulties and challenges that we face. As pro-Europeans, we have to speak up, to defend Europe and defend European values. This is what we stand for as a clear majority of pro-Europeans here in the European Parliament. This is what we are ready to achieve in the next years together with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mureșan. Can I please ask the colleagues to be quiet as we finalize this debate with the President of Romania, Klaus Iohannis. Dominic Ruiz de Veza, 1 minute.
Muchas gracias.
Yes, thank you very much, President Metsola. And thank you also to President Iohannis for your words. I would like to congratulate you for your commitment to European integration and for your European spirit. And I would also like to thank you for having mentioned the institutional dimension in your presentation. I think it's only quite clear that if we have an enlarged Europe, and if we do start relaunching the enlargement process in the European Union, we're going to have to make sure that that is accompanied by a deepening of the accompanying processes. You have referred to the fact that we should not rule out a reform of the treaties, which is something I welcome as well. But I think we have to go a step further in that direction. You referred to the passerelle clauses. It is true, these could be triggered because they are set out in the Lisbon Treaty to allow us to deal with more issues by qualified majority voting. But for the past 14 years, the Council has not managed to do this, and I very much hope that we don't have to wait yet another 14 years. So please support the European Parliament's proposal of reform of the treaties.
Minutes.
Уважаема госпожо председател, господин президент, госпожо комисар.
Madam President, Madam Commissioner, Mr. President, Bulgaria and Romania fulfill all the requirements for full Schengen membership. This has been repeatedly confirmed here in this plenary hall. Nevertheless, for political reasons, we are kept outside for more than 10 years, and this makes our citizens inferior category of Europeans who cannot enjoy the full range of their rights. So a partial access is not a success. Mr. President, what are the specific actions you discuss with Bulgaria to remove all the obstacles in our transport links? The discrimination against Bulgarians and Romanians cannot be tolerated.
Dear President, thank you for your presentation today. Our two countries have similar histories, not just in Christian Orthodoxy, but we had dictatorships. You had a totalitarian country run by the Kremlin. We had a dictatorship run by the Pentagon. Today, we see clouds gathering over Europe. We have Euro elections. I would like your wisdom and your experience. How do we convince the voter that the solution is not the extreme populace, but more democracy, that we need a new contract for the citizen of Europe? That's what I would call it, a contract to complete the European project, something that most of the members here and the farmers in the streets feel has not been completed. So it's our duty, and your wisdom perhaps in the answer, to help us come up with the proper arguments to bring Europe of our dreams. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the time for Mr. President to respond to a variety of questions and comments that have been made. Mr. President, you have the floor to conclude this debate. Can I please ask you, dear colleagues, to keep quiet?
Thank you, Madam President. Honourable members of the European Parliament, thank you very much. It is a privilege for me to speak to you here in the center of European democracy. Thank you for your very positive feedback. I thank the speakers of the political groups for their positions, and I appreciate very much the positive and constructive approach in all the views expressed here. But let me thank you specifically for one issue most of all mentioned, which is the Schengen issue. Romania is a very determined, a very strong, and a very faithful member of the Union. We really believe that the Union has to be united, strong, secure, prosperous. To make this happen, we have to finish the European integration of all the member states, including Romania. So let's hope that we make the decisive step. We have the first step in place. It's a good sign, and let's continue. There have been then some issues, and I think you agree it would go too far if I answered each and every question. So let me just point out a relatively small number of issues, and I think you expect me to be honest on these things, so I'll try to be short and honest. When I ran for president in 2014 for the first time, I promised to the Romanians a couple of things. I'm not a great speaker, and I'm not excelling in promises. So I said, I will keep Romania firm on the European track, on the transatlantic track. I will see about the economy as far as the President can do this to bring more prosperity. But one important issue, which was very dear to me, I promised to strengthen the rule of law, which I did. We have less corruption. We have an independent judiciary. And this is not what I say, it's what the Commission says and what you said, because you accepted the Commission's report on the so-called CVM. And one important issue was not only to have an independent judiciary, a strong prosecution, it was also important to have independent regulators. Well, I hear that one regulator had an issue with one business, and as everywhere in a democracy and the rule of law, people, if they feel the decision was not so good, go before a judge. This is what happened. And the judges decided that the decision was correct. This is what I understand if we speak about the rule of law. Everybody has the same right. Everybody has the right to a fair trial. And everybody has to accept the result. Now, many of you asked more or less precisely what I believe should happen in the European Union. I stated a number of issues in my opening remarks, but if it comes to it, what should we do with the Union to make it function better? Where are the problems? Where are the real problems? Where are the systemic problems? And what can be done? Well, some systemic problems and some important issues have been discussed in this House, on our streets, in the marketplaces, and in convenings. This is, I think you just finished before I arrived, a discussion about the common European agricultural policy. That's an issue. We have a decision on this as of 2020, 4 years ago. So obviously people ask me and I ask others, why did it take us 4 years and huge European protests to rethink some issues of the common agricultural policy? Maybe could have happened faster. We are talking about the environment, about climate change. That's all correct. Personally, I'm very much involved in these issues. I am really convinced that we have to fight climate change, and I believe that we have to protect our environment, and we can do it. We proved it. We proved it in Romania, and we have a good policy in this respect, but we have to do more. Now we have the Green Deal, which is super. But let me tell you, if it is not sustainable and if it does not lead to economic growth, and if we do not take everybody with us, it will be a failure. So, brief, elections upcoming. Most of you are probably running for new mandate. That's fine. Not me. I'm finished. End of this year, I finish my mandate, and that's it. So, I believe that 3 things should be changed or should be improved. First, our relationship with the European citizens. my impression, maybe I'm wrong, is that if the citizens are here, we are here. We are levitating a bit high. Maybe we should decrease and be closer to our citizens. Because what we do is correct, but we almost lost our ability to explain this to our people. We are not really performing well when it comes to communicate our very good results. We're doing a super job, and more Europeans believe the Union is failing. Well, this is about communication between the voters and the politicians. So this is one issue where I believe we can and should do more and better. Second, some of you asked about decision-making. It's about the architecture of the Union. How do we make it better? And we have to improve it. Because if we take in Ukraine, Moldova, and the Western Balkans, we will be a large union. And this decision-making, especially in crisis, war, pandemic, and energy crisis, has to be correct, transparent, but fast. So I believe that we have to work on our architecture. Some of it may be possible to change without opening the treaties, but some issues have to be changed in the treaties. They are not perfect. Since we have these treaties, I hope you don't mind me telling you, years have passed. We are a different union, and we work towards a different union, and I hope very much you agree we work towards a better union. So let's work on this. At least one issue, and you will know what I mentioned. It is not acceptable that one member is using a veto to stop all of us helping others. So if we're not in a position yet to generalize a qualified majority of voting, which may be defined different than it is now, I'm not talking about the details, but at least we should have the courage to say no veto, and let's take it out of the decision-making process. That's something very concrete we should do. Finally, our external image. Well, I believe we have to be much better here. First, we have to integrate those who want to be with us and those we want to be with us. Ukraine, Moldova, Western Balkans, they try to become part of the Union, some of them for 20 years. I mean, are we serious? Are we? Do we want them? If we do, let's go. If not, let's say them no. But dragging on, you know very well, never makes things better. And somehow linked to this is how we act towards others. It's what we call foreign policy. Well, guess what? We don't have one. This is strange, isn't it? We have as many foreign policies as we have member states. And maybe even more. Thanks, you're right. Maybe this is the reason why our foreign policy weight is way, way, way smaller than our economic weight. And this is not good for us, because economic policy and foreign policy have to go hand in hand. So we should work on these two, extension and foreign policy. Now, the elections are upcoming. Each of you is going to fight for a seat, or a principle, or a value. That's correct. Every party comes up with concepts, with ideas, with policies. You will accuse each other of being, well, the wrong guys. You will fight for as many votes as possible. That's absolutely fair. That's the essence of democracy. Campaigning, profiling, trying to be the best. Please do so. You sitting here are the best. This is why you sit here. But please, if you fight each other, don't fight Europe. If you fight for votes against your opponents, still fight for European Union. And if you fight with the other party and tell them they're not the right guys, please do not fight against the European solidarity, because without this, we are doomed. So no matter who is winning, and I hope the best are winning, let's uphold our values, our principles, our unity, and our solidarity. Thank you very much.